any good acting has behavior with it.
Nate, why? Why such bitterness? What have I done to you? Get out! You're no nephew of mine. As far as I'm concerned, you're as dead as that wretch Cermak.
You have to embellish the words with a certain amount of gravity. Because we're talking about things that are really important here, that are kind of secret. There's a natural kind of darkness when you talk about noir. You know, it's great. I love it.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me. Moi, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting at you. You Imagination Connoisseurs from right here in the Robservatory. This is Robservations episode number 1106. And there's a lot to talk about.
They came to Earth 40,000 years ago, and even now, they continue to observe us. The outer space connection revealed startling new proof that Earth is being visited by travelers from another world. The Outer Space Connection, an astonishing motion picture experience, based on the controversial bestseller that boldly unlocks the secret of our universe. See evidence revealed for the first time that creates a terrifying link between past and future, between Earth and the stars. Experience the Outer Space Connection from Sun International.
That was a trailer for, obviously, the movie The Outer Space Connection. A movie that I saw theatrically in, wait for it, 1975. And let me read you a little bit of information on this movie. The Outer Space Connection is a 1975 documentary film produced by Alan Landsberg, directed by Fred Wachowski, and narrated by, yes, Rod Serling. This documentary was the last in a trilogy of ancient astronaut documentaries produced by Landsberg. The film was one of the last projects that Rod Serling worked on prior to his death in 1975. This documentary explores the controversial ancient astronauts theory that extraterrestrials explored the Earth in the distant past. These extraterrestrials had a profound effect on the creation of human life and the founding of civilization, after which they left mankind to evolve on its own with the promise they would return at a future date for an unknown purpose. Landsberg created two other television documentaries dealing with the ancient astronaut subject, In Search of Ancient Astronauts and In Search of Ancient Mysteries, both produced in 1973. All three projects were narrated by Rod Serling. The Outer Space Connection was based on a book by the same name, also written by Landsberg and published by Bantam Books. The documentary was both directed and written by Fred Wachowski, who also wrote and directed the previous film In Search of Ancient Mysteries. Parts of the film were shot in Park City, Utah. The film was released by Sun Classic Pictures, who also released the documentary film Chariots of the Gods in 1970. This film was released on VHS during the 80s and is found on many file-sharing sites on the internet. I was 8 in 1975 when I saw this movie, and I went with my sister. Now, Sun Classic Pictures in the 70s, this was the first that I had seen. I hadn't seen Chariots of the Gods, but I had read the book by Eric von Däniken when I was 8. I've told people many times on this show, I was obsessed as a child with UFOs and spontaneous human combustion and the Bermuda Triangle. And it was a great time to be alive because there was a lot of shit coming out about all of these things. At my local library, the Mercer Island Library, there was a shelf of books dealing with strange phenomenon. I read them all. And seeing this documentary, I mean, there were TV. I was as excited to see this documentary as I would later be for Star Wars, even though I didn't know anything about Star Wars because it wouldn't come out for 2 more years. So as a child steeped in Planet of the Apes and Star Trek and the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, I mean, I don't know what that says. I mean, I've tried to ask my mother, what was it like to have an 8-year-old kid who wanted to see this movie in the theater? She doesn't really remember because she thinks I haven't changed at all, which perhaps is true. But here's the thing. I, from a very young age, watching movies like this and reading books like the Nazca lines that you could see from the sky that look like birds and things, I just assumed that this was true. Like, ancient aliens existed. They helped build the pyramids, all the different megalith structures, Stonehenge, whatever the fuck was going on. I just took it as a fact that alien intervention was a part of our civilization from the time I was 8. So this, I felt the need to explain this now, so you could understand where I, as a person, has come from. I was an 8-year-old Fox Mulder. I didn't just want to believe, I believed. Because when you see movies like this in the theater, you know, you can't tell me as an 8-year-old it's not true. Of course it's true. Why would it be in a movie theater if it wasn't true? Of course it was true. Of course aliens built the pyramids. I later heard Gene Roddenberry make a quote that said aliens didn't build the pyramids because human beings did, because human beings are awesome. And we have that kind of ingenuity. Now, why do I feel the need to bring this particular thing up about myself? Well, it's a certain mindset. I mean, once you are open to the fact, like, I don't know what made me so enamored of science fiction, fantasy, and horror at a very young age. And I don't understand why I was so deeply immersed in it. And what was it about all of these things? Like, my imagination, I guess it was because I wanted to believe that the universe was this wondrous place. Now, the universe is a wondrous place. You don't need ancient astronauts or aliens to start delving into the cosmos and realize how fucking incredible the universe actually is. But to be someone like myself and to grow older is to be frustrated because we will never have answers. We'll just never know. I'll never know. I want to know, but I'll never know. So the very idea that there are people on this planet right now that know the truth about ancient astronauts or alien technologies or anything to do with alien life is frustrating for me to be like, I feel like I've been gaslit since I was 8. And, you know, you show me Ross Coulthart or whatever, you show me Chris Cuomo interviewing people, you show me David Grush, you show me David Fravor, you show me any of these people that we've been watching on the internet paraded out whenever there's, just this week, David Grush on the steps of the Capitol going off talking about, well, you got to read this Australian document from the early 70s which says these things, and I've been part of crash retrieval programs. Why do they always have to crash, by the way? Why is it that we can only recover alien, like you come all the way from, whether you're from another dimension or you're human beings from the future or you're alien beings that have traveled vast distances across the cosmos. Why are your ships crashing? Have they been shot down? Are they badly engineered? Even the idea of crash retrievals bothers me because that means, you know, maybe they're undersea base that's off the coast of California, off whatever that island is where the Navy's train, all the Navies, the American Navy trains. I mean, look, I've read it all. I watch it all. I listen to it all. And I want to believe. But now it's gotten to the point where all this disclosure business, how many Tic Tac videos do I have to watch? Some of them are convincing. I've seen some videos lately and these drops. There was another one today. You know, and I watch these things, and there are a few that are pretty astonishing. But you look at all this stuff and you think, doesn't anyone have a 4K picture? No one carried their iPhone around. Probably the alien technology makes those iPhones mute, whatever. When you have them in the range of wherever you could take a picture of, the electromagnetic energy shuts down your iPhone or something. You know, there's all kinds of things coming out, bubbling to the top. And I want to believe them all. I do. But it's gotten to the point where I kind of feel now that, you know, you can only hear people cry wolf so much. And at this point, if a giant 15-mile-long city destroyer like an Independence Day flew over and covered 100 cities on the earth, the next morning it would be memed, it would be laughed at, it would be TikToked to death. One of the things I loved about Independence Day is the biggest building in LA, that big bank building that gets vaporized by the aliens. They're having a rave on the top of the building, you know, stop and be friendly or whatever. Or that's actually a sign that was in Close Encounters. I mean, we can't even take this subject seriously as a people. And so I don't think that the idea that it's going to have or lately, I've read some really interesting stuff where it gets out there, like there's this notion that to find out the truth about extraterrestrial life would be a profound ontological shock to us humans. There has been a very interesting between simulation theory, that we're living in a simulation. By the way, that's another rabbit hole that I love going down. There's simulation theory, but then there's the idea that human beings, our lives really don't amount to anything, that we are just vessels for consciousness. Like by we're imbued with consciousness that not everybody is imbued with or whatever, and we are just vessels for consciousness that other people are going to farm, aliens or what. Dude, it gets wild, let me tell you. And I love reading all about it. I don't have an ontological shock. I mean, it's not my belief in my essence of being human and what matters to me. Like, even if that we are a simulation. You know, I go back to the first season Next Generation episode, The Big Goodbye, with the holodeck and Cyrus Redblock, Lawrence Tierney playing Cyrus Redblock. And he realizes the reality of he's a hologram, and he steps out of the holodeck and he disintegrates because the hologram can't. It doesn't matter whether we're a simulation. It doesn't matter if we're holograms, or it doesn't matter anything like that, because we feel, I know that whatever I am, whether I'm flesh and blood, which I tend to believe, whether this is a simulation, and if it's a simulation, which level of the simulation is it? Because if you start going really deep into simulation theory, if our civilization gets so sophisticated that we can create a simulation of reality that's as real as the world you're sitting in right now, well, it's a good bet that what we would say would be base reality isn't. Base reality would be the reality, and you create a simulation, and that simulation eventually creates a simulation, and that's so on and so forth, and on and on and on. We might be 33 simulations away from base reality. But does that really matter? I know that I'm alive. I know that I can have, like the dude, a White Russian mixed cocktail made by Cutwater that I enjoy. It's like, you know, when Joey Pants is talking in The Matrix. I know this isn't real, but it tastes like a steak. Put me back in The Matrix. I get it. Because really, it's only our senses that tell us we're alive, and our senses are electrochemical reactions with our bodies. So maybe I'm sitting in a machine somewhere and it's only giving me a reality. There's all of those things happening at the same time. And right now, more than ever, the notion of disclosure that there is, in fact, I mean, look, we live in a time where people think the Artemis 2 mission was a fucking simulation, that we haven't been to the moon, that the Earth is flat. Those things to me are dumb because the reality of those things are dumb. A flat Earth means the universe is dumb. A flat Earth doesn't work. A flat Earth means what's on the other side of the Earth. I mean, people haven't thought this through, and I don't like dumb ideas. If you're gonna give me a cockamamie, outlandish idea, you got to do it in such a way that it's attractive to believe in. I don't believe the flat Earth is not an attractive idea to believe in. It's not fun. It doesn't matter. And people say, "Well, Rob, what if it's true?" It's not true. How do I know it? Because a flat Earth is dumb. Physics abhors a flat Earth. Gravity abhors a flat Earth. So I know there's no flat Earths. I know we actually went to the moon because it was harder to fake it in 1969 when we landed on the moon. So you can believe these things if you want. I mean, you can go build a telescope, and you there's ways that you yourself can prove to yourself that we actually went to the moon. And but anyway, disclosure, however, the idea that we are alive and that we exist in this universe proves the question is, if you have any comprehension at all of the vastness of the cosmic infinitude of the entire universe. I mean, if you want to go down an existential rabbit hole that'll put the zap on your brain, look into all of that. Look into the actual distances, not just between planets, but between solar systems and galaxies. I mean, once you delve into the actual infinitude of the universe, it's soul-crushing. There's a reason why Douglas Adams came up with the total perspective vortex for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You've seen yourself in relation to the rest of the universe, and what did you discover? What I knew all the time, that I'm a really great guy. But if you delve into these things, you can't help but get a sense of awe and wonder. And there's an idea that there's a school of thought that thinks that says that in terms of evolution, sentience such as ours ultimately will lead to digital life, that biological life gives way to digital life, that we are going to create immortal AIs. And that makes sense to me, and I don't have a problem with that. You know, if we can put our engrams like Dr. Daystrom into living machines, or look, if I could upload my consciousness into the mainframe of a generational starship that's going to take 10,000 years to get to the nearest solar system, but it needs human beings to work in its systems, sign me up. If somebody said, Rob, you know, you're getting in, you're about to approach the last quarter of your life, we need people that are going to go to Mars on a one-way trip, sign me the fuck up. I would, if I went up like Ed Baldwin and I die on Mars, spoiler alert, yes, I would do that. That would be the ultimate fulfillment of my life, is to go to another planet. I mean, that would be the ultimate realization. I mean, think about it. You could take like on that kind of a trip. If I could have my entire movie collection encoded on a piece of crystal, a piece of glass, which could happen, I could spend the rest of my life, all the books I have here, all the graphic novels, the music, everything that I've collected over my life could be encoded on a little disc. I could spend the rest of my life working on a Mars base every day, even if there was tons of monotony. I could hang out in my stateroom and enjoy all my media. You know, maybe have a nice little girlfriend or something. And be one of the first Martians. I would do it in a second. That said, and look, I look into all of it. That said, let's talk about some movies. Today, June 12th, 1981, 45 years ago today, Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark opened. Now, in my life, the same year I saw The Outer Space Connection, 1975, I also saw Steven Spielberg's Jaws. Now, Steven Spielberg, like the director of Obsession, started making Jaws when he was 26 years old. It didn't come out until he was 28, but he was 26 when he started making Jaws. 26. And Jaws was my first experience in a theater. I told you My parents wouldn't let me see The Exorcist. Even I heard the radio ads, but they wouldn't let me go see it because I was 6. Boy, what that might have been like. Where would I have been as a person if that had happened? But seeing Jaws in a movie theater was, at the time, the greatest movie-going experience that I could possibly have, because I didn't see it right away. It played for a long time, and it had become notorious. I was 8, and, I'd heard from friends at school and things like that. So if I was 8 years old, that means I was in the 2nd grade in elementary school, at Island Park Elementary School, which means my teacher was Mrs. Bard, later Mrs. Reith, and we all had crushes on her. Mrs. Frum was 1st grade, Mrs. Young was 3rd grade, but it was Mrs. Bard, a.k.a. Mrs. Reith, because she got married during the school year, which, by the way, also, if you think back, if your school teacher who was hot and you had a crush on when you were 8, it was difficult to deal with the fact that she was getting married. But we did that. We got through it. We got through the trauma. But anyway, so I was 8. Again, 8. I was 8 when I saw The Outer Space Connection. And imagine this thing when you go see Jaws and you'd heard all this stuff about it. It exceeded anything that I would have thought of or whatever. I didn't know what I was going to see when I saw Jaws. To see Jaws in a theater at 8 years old, talk about being turned into an imagination connoisseur. It was mind-blowing. Like, the head, Ben Gardner's head coming out of the boat. And the whole, and this is why Cameron Mitchell's letters talking about how boring Jaws is for modern day audiences. I'm like, I read that and I just think, oh, you spring flower. You could say, well, yeah, I saw the movie when I was 8, sure. But once you see that at that age, that impressionable age, the name Steven Spielberg took on mythic proportions. Because one dude did that, apparently. I didn't know that David Brown, Zanuck, it was a Zanuck Brown production. And then, of course, I didn't really know who John Williams was, but I knew the theme, and it was a big deal. Jaws was a big deal. It was a huge deal. And as an 8-year-old, it was firmly cemented as a legend, as a myth in your own life. Like, to see Jaws in the theater was to survive something. As an 8-year-old, it was forbidden fruit. Shit like that did not go down. Now, it's kind of like when I was 5 and saw War of the Worlds and the aliens, the Martians, killed a priest. That I've talked about on this show. That was a seminal moment in my life. As a young Jewish kid, my best friend, Jeff Swafford, was Catholic. I'd been to church. And you don't kill a priest. And to see aliens kill a priest as a 5-year-old, that was very transgressive. Before I even knew what transgressive was. Jaws was transgressive. Kids were threatened. Limbs fell off. Blood was in the water. The Kintner boy might spill out all over the dock. I mean, as an 8-year-old, everything about Jaws was fucking rad. I mean, you can't undersell how exciting this stuff was. And also, you can't undersell how transformative it was to my little imaginative mind. Because I hadn't seen a lot of movies in the theater that were like that movie. The year later, 1976, Dino De Laurentiis' King Kong came out. Logan's Run came out. And it began, 8, 9, these things. Logan's Run had boobies, had the Love Shop. And Jenny Agutter dropping trow in the ice cave. You saw this kind of stuff, and it was like, it turned me, I was a horny 9-year-old. I was like, I need boobies in my life. This is what movies were doing to me. But the name Steven Spielberg, what Steven Spielberg brought to me was an experience. Took me to a place that my young 8-year-old life would never take me to outside of a movie theater. And yet his name loomed forever large in my mind. Because he already gave me Jaws. And then I want to say that I saw Duel on TV not too long after I saw Jaws in the theater, because I'm sure they reran Duel again, because now Duel was a made-for-TV movie that Steven Spielberg directed that, if memory serves, was based on a Richard Matheson story. And, Duel, again, an experience. And I think I probably knew that Steven Spielberg directed Duel because his name had become such a selling point. And I love Duel. I do own it on 4K. Yes, I do. Duel's an incredible movie, even though it was just made for TV. You could see, Spielberg as a young 20-something was already killing it cinematically. And then I don't know when I saw the Sugarland Express, but I do know that 2 years later, young Master Spielberg came out guns a-blazing in 1977. Now, keep in mind, I was 2 years out of seeing The Outer Space Connection. I had been reading about UFOs, the story I told about my dad's friend, Captain John Harder. I told this story back on a few Robservations ago, a couple weeks back. I read a story about a pilot, Captain John Harder, who had seen UFOs as a commercial pilot, and he was my dad's friend. So I actually got to ask somebody who was the subject of an account I'd read in a book about seeing a UFO. I got to ask that actual person about his experience, and he confirmed that it happened and he couldn't explain it. Me, a kid, I got to read the story of somebody my dad knew who bought me model aircraft. He gave me that 1/48 scale B-52 bomber. And he gave me a B-17 as well. Big model kit. Those are the biggest model kits I built at that time in my life, with the B-17 first, and then he gave me the B-52, which was just, come on. So that fueled all of this as well, to actually have met someone that really saw a UFO. So Star Wars had come out May 25th, 1977, and then more into the holiday season, almost 6 months later, Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. Now, I already told the long, lengthy story about seeing Star Wars for the first time. But imagine that theater, the UA 150 theater, and the here is on the corner of 6th and Blanchard, and the line for Star Wars would extend down. Well, guess where Close Encounters opened? If you were to cross the street, here was the King Cinema. And here's where Close Encounters of the Third Kind opened, in downtown Seattle. And even though Star Wars had been playing since May, the lines, and then the lines for Close Encounters, went down the same block, and both of these theaters had giant marquees. Now, I'd seen Star Wars probably 11 times since then, the 11 times I'd seen it. Star Wars was still on the giant marquee, and the King Cinema, you had to walk down the stairs, so it was kind of lower, but it had that marquee too. Imagine what it was like to be a kid, to be 10 years old, and have Star Wars on one side of the street and Close Encounters on the other side of the street. Now, having given you all this preamble, it's hard, by that time I was reading up on movies, there were newspaper articles, I was seeking information out, and when Close Encounters came out, there was a lot of talk about ancient astronauts, Eric von Däniken, the Chariots of the Gods, the Outer Space Connection, the lines at Nazca, the pyramids, J. Allen Hynek, the UFO expert that worked for Project Blue Book. There was all kinds of information that I was already very aware of because of my younger days. Now I'm 10, and I was like, amongst my peer group, I was a fucking Einstein of UFO lore at 10. And so going to see Close Encounters I knew it was a science fiction movie, but for me, Star Wars was a space fantasy. Close Encounters was fucking real. I mean, it was a big, big, big fucking deal for me. Big deal. Now, I don't know how up you are on your Close Encounters these days, but in my mind, Star Wars and Close Encounters were neck and neck in terms of how important they were to me as a kid, for obvious reasons. I can't tell you. Everyone talks about the opening of Star Wars, which, duh. Star Wars logo, the thing, the blockade runner, the Star Destroyer, everyone knows that. But people don't talk about enough the opening of Close Encounters and John Williams' music, and how it starts with this, ooh, and there's like a choir, and it builds 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 to a crescendo, and it goes, da-da! You're in the Sonora Desert. There's fucking Flight 19. Now, I got to tell you, I had built models, well, a model, of the planes, the training flight. So Flight 19 was a training flight that was lost in the Bermuda Triangle. Now, I had read Charles Berlitz's book. I knew what Flight 19 was. When it opened up, when Close Encounters opens up in the desert and you see Flight 19, I knew exactly what that was. I knew exactly what it was. And here's the thing. Steven Spielberg knew what it was too. So clearly, the motherfucker who made this movie, he was steeped in UFO lore. He knew his shit, right? He must have known his shit. So immediately my 10-year-old self was like, oh, this dude knows what's up. He's read books I've read. None of my friends have read these books. I don't know any 10-year-old people that knows what Flight 19 was. Again, it's hard to explain how over the moon I was, so because I knew that I was watching a movie, and I knew that Steven Spielberg, the guy who made Jaws, he knew, man. He knew about the Chariots of the Gods. He knew Ancient Astronauts. He knew the lines in Nazca. He knew Curlian photography. He knew. He probably knew all about spontaneous human combustion. And I'm sitting there as a 10-year-old kid going, holy shit. This motherfucker knows. And I watched this movie. It might as well have been a documentary. I believed. And I'm watching this, and even as a 10-year-old, I felt the plight of Roy Neary. Now, remember, a lot of people forget this. There are two versions. Before the Star Wars special edition, there was the special edition of Close Encounters. But one of my favorite things in Close Encounters, one of my favorite scenes, it was one of my which they fucking cut out of the special edition, is there's an air traffic controller scene very near the beginning of the movie. And it's just dudes in an air traffic control center. I loved this scene because it was terrifying and it was exciting, and you have air traffic, and I don't know his name, is a black actor, but his voice, and he's like the best air traffic controller that's ever been portrayed in a movie with the way he does his voice. I've always wanted to say, if more, for a long time when I saw Street Smart in '87, which is the first movie I ever saw Morgan Freeman in, I'm like, was Morgan Freeman the air traffic controller in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? But that scene, everything about Close Encounters, the whole, I was so locked in, I was so into this movie, and then by the, we all know now, it seems silly to say this, but I can't explain to you. I'm explaining it to you right now, but I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to convey. To have received Star Wars and then received, for me personally, I'm just talking about me personally now, to get Star Wars and Close Encounters in 1 year. I mean, I might as well have been given a burning bush from God, or something. These were revelations to me, to my young, badass 10-year-old self. It told me that the world that we live in was full of like-minded people like myself. It told me that there are adults on this planet that know what's up. And their names are George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. In the same year, for my young self. But they touched me in different ways. Don't make any jokes. When I saw Star Wars and Close Encounters, even though they were both obvious, one's a space fantasy, one is a 70s conspiracy thriller, science fiction fantasy movie, it was, and make no mistake, the great thing about Close Encounters is it is a paranoid 70s thriller, in addition to being a quest movie, in addition to being a science fiction movie. And the funny thing about Close Encounters is, what people tend to forget about Close Encounters is in that movie, the aliens are dropping breadcrumbs. The aliens have decided it's time to meet. We're going to reveal ourselves. It's time to meet, but only if you earn it. You human beings, you got to figure this shit out. So if you watch the director's cut, my for those of you interested, of the 3 cuts of Close Encounters, I prefer the third ultimate director's cut. That is a combination of the special edition. So it's got the Cotopaxi scene in the Mongolian desert where they find the ship, but you don't go into the mothership, which I much prefer. So for those of you who don't know, Close Encounters was a monster hit. And then to make more money, Columbia Pictures gave more money to Steven Spielberg. And in 1980, they released the special edition where he took some scenes out, like the air traffic control scene, which was a big fucking mistake. And then they gave him a bunch of money to film the end of Close Encounters, which was basically Roy Neary gets to go in to see V'ger. That's how I looked at it. But you don't need to see the end of... I mean, everybody liked, oh my God, see inside of the ship, because everyone wanted to see the inside of the ship. We never did. But anyway, I prefer the final version, the third version, Close Encounters Redux. What is it? The director's cut? The third cut of Close Encounters. There's probably more cuts. There's TV cuts or whatever. But in my mind, there's the theatrical release, the special edition, and then the third cut of the film that restored the air traffic control scene, because I love that scene so much. But anyway, so the thing about Close Encounters was you've got your everyman quest. Roy Neary's on a quest. He's been touched by the aliens. He's having his psychic visions and all that. Then you have Claude Lacombe. You've got Bob Balaban and Francois Truffaut, and they're like the UFOologists. You know, but they're also in cahoots with the government. And so the government, though, is benevolent, really. The government knows what's up, but they also have to get rid of every Christian soul within 50 miles. And so when you're watching Close Encounters, there's these multiple storylines. But at the end of the day, no one is nefarious. Now, of course, do they have to, like, fake a chemical attack and put all these animals to sleep? Yes. And are they not nice to the non-military people, to the civilians that have been called, who have seen flying saucers, that have had this they're going crazy because they see images of Devil's Tower? Yes. I mean, so what are they going to do? They've got to keep a lid on things. They can't let civilians willy-nilly up to the dark side of the moon and watch the mothership land. I get all that stuff. And how in the Mayflower Project, none of the astronauts that have trained for this get to go up. Only Roy Neary gets to go up because he earned it. The aliens touched his mind, so they already know him. They're Roy Neary fans, and he was the only one who made it. So he's the only one that gets to go up into the ship. Some people have said the other Mayflower people get to go, but I don't no. And what's really interesting at the end of Close Encounters is you realize that there's people in Victorian garb, like the aliens have been collecting human beings for at least 100 years. Einstein was probably one of them, you know, and so that's interesting. They've been studying us. The whole idea of, like, the Barney and Betty Hill story had been out before, and there was a lot of, I don't know if the Travis Walton story had happened yet, the Fire in the Sky story, timelines, I'm not really sure. But anyway, so Close Encounters was, you know, I probably saw it as many times as I saw Star Wars, and then getting it on VHS. I think my friend Jimmy Fiddler had the bootleg of Star Wars, but I don't know if his dad got a bootleg of Close Encounters before it was released. And I think the first time, now again, I'd have to check. I think the first time that Close Encounters came out on home video, it was in fact the special edition, because movies just didn't, especially big blockbuster movies, didn't come out on home video right away. Home video was relatively new. In 1977, I didn't even have a VCR yet. I don't know if magnetic video, I don't know if Andre Blais had licensed titles for 3/4 inch, but I don't think magnetic video had released Fox's 50 titles yet. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. I didn't look that up before this show. So anyway, Steven Spielberg, the fucking man. Jaws, Close Encounters. Now, 1941, of course, is, I think, a misfire, but a glorious misfire. You know, he used his clout to make this gigantic, overblown, it's a mad, 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 mad world-esque comedy with everything but the kitchen sink, great miniature work, all kinds of craziness. Christopher Lee as a Nazi sub-commander. I mean, there's so many great things about 1941, but it's a miss. I agree. But I still went and saw it. But anyway, I didn't love it. But then George Lucas gives him another shot. Steven, we've got this movie. I got this movie about this archaeologist, but you got to make it. You can't go over budget. Because Steven Spielberg went way over budget. He used the clout he'd earned on Jaws and Close Encounters to go way over budget on 1941 for Universal. So then they're going to go to Paramount and make Raiders. And George is like, no, bro, I'm arranging for the money. You got to make this on time and on budget. And he did. And he made Raiders. And again, Raiders came out 45 years ago today. And the first time I saw it was actually either a week or two before this anniversary. I've told the story before. We saw Raiders. My friends and I saw Raiders. They would screen movies. They would do public sneaks to generate word of mouth, and you'd go to one movie and they would pair it with another movie. The new movie would be paired with a movie that was already in the theaters playing, and in our case, it was Excalibur. So I had to go see Excalibur again, which was problematic because Excalibur was rated R. And, you had to get parents to take you in. So I don't know if it was my parents or someone else's parents, but we went and saw Excalibur, and then we got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now imagine... By the way, the trailers, which you couldn't watch online, I'd seen the trailer in the theater maybe once or twice for Raiders, and the first trailer for Raiders was like, what is this? I mean, I've told this story a million times before, but people didn't know, like, what the fuck is this? Raiders, what? It's about Noah's Ark? What? Raiders of the Lost Ark? Is there space and science fiction in this? What is this? Nobody knew, and the trailer wasn't very good. The trailer did not convey, and we all went, but we had to see it because it was George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Now, nowadays, people just whatever. But you have to understand, we burgeoning imagination connoisseurs at Fort fucking teen, I just had my 14th birthday. I was 14. And the summer of 1981, we'd had Excalibur. We're talking For Your Eyes Only, Clash of the Titans, Raiders of the Lost Ark. There was a lot of great stuff coming out in the wake of the year that we had that was 1980. So there was a lot of genre fare, and it was all playing at the Factoria Cinemas. So you had a Bond film coming out, you had a Ray Harryhausen movie coming out, you had Raiders, you had Spielberg and Lucas teaming up. So the promise was there. Trailers didn't do it. Well, I don't need to tell y'all, what it was like to see Raiders for the first time. To know nothing about it. No one knew anything about it. We were like one of the first audiences to see it. I think my first girlfriend, Jennifer Epstein, was with us. I think Mark Elfendahl was with us. I think so. And mind's blown. So this was Lucas and Spielberg. UA-150, King Cinema, those lines going down the block, Lucas on one side, Spielberg on the other. Now it's 4 years later. 4 years later. We've had Star Wars and Empire. We did have Close Encounters 1941. But now they've teamed up with Han Solo. And needless to say, that was all she wrote. And then George Lucas and Steven Spielberg loomed very, very large for the rest of my life until right now. I don't need to tell you what Steven Spielberg delivered the next year. As producer, he gave us Poltergeist on June 4th, 1982, the same day that Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan opened, and 2 weeks later, E.T. So for my, UFO-addled brain, that is a little insight into where I'm at when it came to my lifelong love of Steven Spielberg. And for the most part, he has continued to blow my mind when he branched out. I mean, E.T., Temple of Doom, Color Purple, Empire of the Sun. I mean, first of all, Color Purple and I was like, why'd Steven Spielberg make Color Purple? Color Purple was the second movie I cried in. I loved Color Purple. Quincy Jones doing the score. Margaret Avery playing Suge Avery. I mean, I love Color Purple. I loved Empire of the Sun. You know, and so I don't need to recount everybody's film careers since then, but I just want to point out, I've now spent 45 minutes talking about why Steven Spielberg meant a lot to me and why the subject matter of aliens means a lot to me. Now, cut to yesterday. In the intervening years, since Close Encounters came out 49 years ago, our popular culture has become inundated with this narrative, and a lot of it has come from pop culture. That aliens, in a way, it's almost like, and there's even a podcast now. You can look it up. As a matter of fact, you know what? I realized I was going to look this up. Let me look this up real quick before I start the show. One of the producers of a show about UFOs, Dark Skies. Let's see, Bryce Zabel. He was the producer of that. Okay, Bryce Zabel has started a podcast. It's his YouTube channel is Stellar Productions, and he has a new podcast called Sound, Light, and Frequency. And he's talking to people in Hollywood, and I kid you not, the premise of this podcast, and it's fairly new, is that Hollywood, and he being somebody, he will tell you the story of how he was approached when he was doing a show about post-Roswell, Dark Skies, that he was approached by somebody that he will tell you is a man in black, somebody that worked for the government, somebody that might have even been an alien, and wanted to recruit them to inject Dark Skies with information that would aid to real disclosure. I kid you not. And he's brought on some other people. They just had Brett Leonard speak. Brett Leonard, who made The Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity, and a great horror movie called Feed that no one's ever heard of that'll disturb the fuck out of you. Brett Leonard talking about a situation where he might have met another character that was wanting to recruit him when he was doing all kinds of research in Silicon Valley to use popular culture to inject the ideas through movies and TV that will make disclosure easier to swallow when it actually happens. So, cut to yesterday when I went and saw Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. Now, I've given you my own experience, and I've told you about my background with UFO phenomenon, seeing Outer Space Connection in 1975. And in my mind, I just believe it. I just believe that, sure, one part of me believes that, yes, not only like when you hear on Joe Rogan's podcast, you hear Bob Lazar talking about working on 0 point energy or power systems at Area 51 or whatever, Area 52, wherever he was going, and he talks about there's an archaeological element to this, you know, and of course, in my mind, in my reality, I believe that let's just assume for the moment that aliens have been visiting Earth. I can understand that they come across our solar system. First of all, you have to believe a lot of things that are probably untrue. If you know anything about the vast distances between planets and solar systems and galaxies, it's probably impossible, honestly, to travel to another star system. Probably impossible. Now, our popular science fiction over the 20th century and now 21st century, we have come to, it's easy for us. Now, of course, they've got hyperdrive. Sure. Laws of physics, they can be broken. Relativity, redshift, blue shift, all that. Well, of course. So it isn't even a stretch for me to believe that if there was an alien presence on Earth, that they have been. Look, I said I want to date a fucking Nordic. Come on, bring them on. Where's the Nordic ladies? Can I be a cunning linguist with an alien woman? I'll try. I want to, but bring it on. But all that aside, I personally would like to believe all of it. And I think that our civilization at this point has been softened up to the point where disclosure could happen. Now, the movie Disclosure Day, I have to say, when I watched it, I'll just cut to the chase. It's in the headline. I was crushed. 49 years after I saw Flight 19 in the opening of Close Encounters, the opening scene, he says the sun came out. He says it sang to him. I expected, there was thought that Steven Spielberg was recruited, and in Bryce Zabel's world, of course they would recruit. Who better than to recruit Steven Spielberg to make a movie about... I thought at the end of fucking Disclosure Day, the sky would have opened and he would have just flat out given the truth. He would have rolled out an actual alien being, and the alien being for real would have, not some CG recreation, would have rolled out in the end of the movie and made a plea to humanity, and then it would have come out that it was a real alien. I mean, that's kind of, I think, what everybody was expecting. Because who better than Steven Spielberg to do something like that? And he's been tub thumping. He's been out on the road. He's been on every podcast. He hasn't been on this one. But he's been on... I know, I don't have the numbers. But he went on every podcast talking about... He came to CinemaCon. It was amazing. But that's what I expected. I expected the same kind of knowledge of the UAP phenomenon that he displayed in the opening scene by giving us Flight 19, which disappeared. He made the connection of Flight 19, which is a training flight out of, I think it was Fort Lauderdale, and they disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. And that's how Close Encounters opened. This story was told many times that Flight 19 was lost in the Bermuda Triangle, and he made the leap that no, what was going on, everything, all the ships and the people that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, the aliens took them to examine mankind. I mean, that was the implication of the movie. And that's what, and when I'm 10 years old watching Close Encounters, I couldn't believe it, because Steven Spielberg was coming out and saying in his movie, he wasn't just saying UFOs are real, he was saying the Bermuda fucking Triangle is real too. And not a lot of people, people talked about it could have been aliens or could have been weird magnetics or something going on there. But he flat out came out and said, and he wrote the story for Close Encounters as well, and various drafts of the script. And so it was like, he fucking knew. So I figured, having been steeped in the last 3 years of disclosure and congressional hearings and all of this malarkey that we've been watching, that I have been drawn in, I've been sucked in. I'm like an addict. It's like, News Nation, give me more interviews with somebody that knows that there's crash retrieval program. I watch all that shit. And I'm waiting. And I'm thinking Big Steve is coming back, guns a-blazing. And this movie isn't just called Disclosure Day. It's gonna really fucking be Disclosure Day. It was not. It was not that. As a matter of fact, I was shocked at how very little Disclosure Day had to do with all of the stuff that's been swirling over the last couple of years around Disclosure Day. Our government is literally doing disclosure drops. The Space Force is doing none of that's addressed in this movie. I mean, There is a story in UFO lore that, and this is spoiler alert, a little bit of a spoiler, there is a true, whether this is true or not, that Richard Nixon took Jackie Gleason, star of The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason, the sheriff from Smokey and the Bandit, took Jackie Gleason, the actor, to an Air Force base and showed him the bodies of aliens. I'm not kidding. In UFO circles, this story is considered to be a true story. And they show that in Disclosure Day. It's one of the videos that they're going to leak. And I was like, okay, well, and that's like the first thing that you see in the movie. The problem that I have with that is it turns the whole idea kind of into a joke. To lead with Nixon and Jackie Gleason is to immediately say, we're goofing. Even if that's a true story. You know, they could have led with somebody like the Barney and Betty Hill story. If you haven't seen that, there's a connection between Star Wars, UFOs, and Barney and Betty Hill. I'll let you discover that one for yourself. The Travis Walton story, Fire in the Sky. You know, they're anyway. I came out of Disclosure Day totally crushed. And it felt as if Steven Spielberg and especially David Koepp, who wrote that, I'm sorry, terrible screenplay. Terrible, terrible, terrible screenplay. It was as if they didn't even go to YouTube and spend a week watching Disclosure videos. Or Ross Coulthart, his Australian brogue or whatever, interviewing all these people. Or Chris Cuomo. Like, none of that was in the movie. None of it. And it was, by the time you get to the third act, it was just a bunch of silliness. And I was like, where's the guy that put Flight 19 together with aliens? Where is that guy? What happened to Steve? Now, even the filmmaking it got to the point where I'm like, don't these people use drone technology? If you're going to follow somebody, can't you like use a drone to follow them? Doesn't the West Coast, whatever the name, Webco, whatever the name of the company, nothing in the movie felt at all like they had delved into any of the lore that's surrounding Disclosure. Christian Harloff spent more time delving into Disclosure and this stuff than they do in the movie Disclosure Day. And that's what bothered me the most about this movie. I thought it was an epic failure on just about every level because Disclosure Day had no bearing or no relation on any of the discussions and things that have been going on in our world now. Only look, somebody actually said to me in one of my comments or something on a recent story, they're like, dude, they said the second episode of X-Files delves into this, and the second episode of X-Files is called Deep Throat. And you know what I did after I saw the movie? I came home last night, and I watched Deep Throat, and I watched the Erlenmeyer Flask, which is the last episode of the first season of the X-Files. Now, you can imagine the X-Files is a big deal for me. The X-Files deals with everything that was in... There's nothing that was in Disclosure Day that we hadn't seen in the X-Files 30 years ago. Nothing. Not one thing. It's as if they didn't watch the X-Files. It's as if David Koepp never watches it. Did Steven Spielberg never watch the X-Files? Because I'm just like, bro... I felt betrayed. I felt like I was watching a J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. And what I mean by that, it was like, when I watched Star Trek 09, I'm like, have you watched Star Trek? Have you ever watched a Star Trek episode? And with Disclosure, there is so much interesting stuff, whether you believe it or not. There's so much interesting stuff. If you spent a day, 12 hours of a day, watching, any of you out there could probably outline a better screenplay than David Koepp wrote. And I know Steven Spielberg came up with the story, just like he did with Close Encounters, but I felt like he's completely like, are you not keeping up? I mean, when you have a TV producer, a movie producer like Bryce Zabel talking about Men in Black visiting him at Hollywood parties, trying to recruit him to make more accurate information about aliens in his TV shows, and you've got those videos, there's like 20 of them now or something, on YouTube that you can watch. These are Brett Leonard, who made Lawnmower Man's like, let me tell you, I was doing this stuff about virtual reality. It got a little weird in Silicon Valley. I'm like, you have people in Hollywood that are, unless it's all part of the whole, who knows? We're all being gaslit. And I'm just like, those videos are more compelling, even though it takes them an hour to get to kind of like me, an hour to get to the point. I'm like, this movie, now, I have a few articles I want to read about this film. But Disclosure Day is, I mean, it was, to me, one of the, I mean, I watched it and it was fine. You know, as a movie, Steven Spielberg hasn't lost his touch, but I'm like, there's like no helicopters in this movie. They're chasing people with cars. Everyone's like these like there's a fleet of cars, and like people are sneaking around. They're like 10 feet away from the government agents behind a rock. I'm like, what is this? The movie did not have a shred of credibility. Look, everybody's doing a great job. Coleman Domingo was great. Emily Blunt is great, but I'm like, what are you guys doing? You know, the aliens now dress up as woodland creatures from a Disney movie? That's what they like. And then when you finally get to the big reveal, what is, like, here's, you know what? My thoughts are all over the place, so I'm going to read the articles that I found to read. And the first one I'm going to read is from the BBC. And here it is. Disclosure Day review, 2 stars, 2 out of 5. Steven Spielberg's flimsy alien drama is like a drab X-Files episode. And that's giving it a lot of credit. Spielberg has returned to the subject of extraterrestrial life with his new blockbuster, but falling far short of Close Encounters, got that right, and E.T., it is a major disappointment. Disclosure Day isn't the worst film of the year, but it may be the most disappointing, 100%. For a start, it's directed by Steven Spielberg, one of the U.S.'s greatest living filmmakers. Truly he is. And for another thing, it's about a topic that has obsessed him throughout his career: aliens coming to Earth. He first touched on the topic in Firelight, a film he made as a teenager in 1964. He returned to it in 1977 for his definitive UFO drama, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he's kept coming back to it ever since. When the spine-tingling trailer for Disclosure Day was released, with a story by Steven Spielberg credit hinting at how close the scenario was to his heart, many of us, me too, hoped that the 79-year-old would deliver a career-crowning masterpiece. His profound last word on a question he has been thinking about and researching for most of his life. And what did he deliver instead? A flimsy, outdated car chase thriller with no ideas about aliens that we haven't heard before. Josh O'Connor stars as Daniel, a cybersecurity boffin who works for a powerful organization called Wardex. The organization was set up to keep information about aliens secret. So yes, on one level, Disclosure Day is a rehash of Men in Black, except without the jokes. I also want to say that Wardex is disappointingly American. It's like based in an office park. If you think about it, we have accounts of UAPs turning off nuclear facilities. So in real life, if those are true, why does Disclosure Day not deal with the rest of the world? Even Close Encounters had a French UFOologist traveling around the planet and figuring stuff out. Clearly, there was a multinational component to this. But in Disclosure Day, I mean, you know, the idea is part of disclosure, one of the reasons that we don't know, or supposedly, is that there is an arms race happening between the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union, China, maybe North Korea, all these other various powers on Earth that are trying to reverse engineer this technology. There's also thought that human advances in the 20th century, dealing with things like microwaves or computer technology, is all derived from backwards engineered alien tech. None of that is in the movie. None of that is addressed. It's like this one company in one building in America that apparently doesn't use drones and doesn't use helicopters. They only travel around in black cars, which was absurd. Josh O'Connor stars as Daniel, a cybersecurity boffin who works for a powerful organization called Wardex. So yes, on one level, Disclosure Day is a rehash of Men in Black, except without the jokes. Daniel decides to reveal, or rather disclose this information, but first he has to drive around for a while with his girlfriend Jane, waiting for the go-ahead from his associate Hugo, Coleman Domingo. Absurdly, Hugo insists that Daniel shouldn't just put the information online. Instead, the videos he's stolen should be shared via a local television news channel? In Spielberg's mind, it seems, the world hasn't moved on since E.T. the Extraterrestrial came out. Another plot strand features Emily Blunt as Margaret, a perky weather forecaster who suddenly finds that she can speak every language on Earth, plus one or two from elsewhere. Blunt is fantastic, and the scenes focusing on Margaret's burgeoning psychic powers are so fun that Spielberg probably should have made a film about them and ditched the rest. But most of Disclosure Day is about the sketchily drawn Daniel and Jane running from Wardex's anonymous goons. Essentially, it's a drab X-Files episode, or a more conventional one battle after another, in which some people we don't care about are hunted by some other people we don't care about. The villain of the piece is Colin Firth's Noah, a standard-issue baddie given standard-issue baddie dialogue. History doesn't have a reset key, he growls. If you do this, there's no undoing it. Firth is badly miscast. Wardex is meant to be the ultimate U.S. deep state cover-up operation, so it's distracting to have a well-spoken Englishman in charge. For that matter, it's distracting that Wardex is all about secrecy, but somehow it has a huge headquarters and countless employees. Wouldn't one of them have spilt the beans already? Still, that's not the film's only head-scratching plot problem. Its biggest mystery isn't about aliens, but why Hugo put so much time and effort into building a life-size model house. I don't even want to... That just was absurd to me. Disclosure Day might not be so unsatisfying if you share the wide-eyed positivity that Spielberg puts into it. Yes, apparently the aliens are all about empathy. Empathy is the greatest superpower in the universe. Yet aren't these the same aliens that are sticking probes up people's asses and turning off nuclear weapons? I don't know. But what does empathy have to do with it? Because the aliens themselves, as Alvaro put it, they just look like somebody's drunk uncle ready to fall over or fall asleep at any moment. Disclosure Day might not be so unsatisfying if you share the wide-eyed positivity that Spielberg puts into it, and there are some expertly choreographed action sequences, even if they do echo various Indiana Jones adventures, but the first line spoken by Firth proves to be prophetic. Well, this is all rather disappointing. The main themes, whether aliens and a supreme deity can coexist and why empathy is important, are conveyed by people making long, polished speeches about them. And its thesis on alien life is so amazingly uninspired that you'd assume that Spielberg had pondered it for several minutes, not several decades. I won't give away the ending, but there is very little in Disclosure that wasn't in the trailer, and very little that wasn't in Close Encounters almost 50 years ago. And I would say all of it was dealt with and better in the X-Files. The only problem with the X-Files was they didn't know what to do with it, and they'd never figured out their mythology. So as much as I dearly love the X-Files, and I do, it is a show that went entirely off a cliff because they had no idea what to do after Disclosure Day. In fact, they never got to it, which is kind of silly. Because what I wanted from Disclosure Day was that should have been the beginning of things. What happens afterwards? What happens when the human race knows and understands and can now interact with whatever is it an X? I mean, imagine it wouldn't just be the profound ontological shock, like I talked about earlier. If we discover that our lives are only so somebody can roll up and take the consciousness that's imbued in each one of us when we're conceived, and they can take it away later and use it, and then the more people there are, the more of the universal consciousness is put into a place where it can be accessed. Maybe that's what our lot in life is, that we are produce for a higher level of consciousness to come take our consciousness and use it, and human bodies are just then husks to be thrown away. I don't have a problem with that. That would not be ontologically shocking for me. I wouldn't sit there and go, well, my life is meaningless to me, because it's not. That might be great. It'd be nice to know that my consciousness lives on with somebody else or somebody takes it. There is no ontological shock to be had by the truth. The truth is just the truth. And, if powerful forces, I've often said, one of the great stories about dealing with malevolent supernatural evil, like whether it's the Sith or whether it's the devil, at the end of the day, you want to run into the problem, well, what do they want? If Satan walks amongst us, the Antichrist shows up, well, is he going to fix your fucking plumbing? What's he going to do? This is where everything drops. This is when everything falls apart. When the Messiah comes, whatever you believe in, so then what? Essentially, our lives are over. We ascend to heaven. We get to go play at the foot of God for the rest of time. Why is that at all desirable? I mean, do I want 72 virgins when I die? No. I want 72 of the dirtiest girls in the world that'll throw me down, peg me, lick my ass, whatever. I want girls that are raunchy as fuck. Why would you want to go to the afterlife and meet a bunch of virgins that don't know what they're doing? But this is what human beings believe in. And this leads me to believe that, we can take the truth. Please tell me what the truth is. I want to know if there's alien technology out there. And look, SpaceX IPO hit. How much more money does Elon Musk need? I mean, unless he can extend my life to thousands of years and make me immortal like the people, the humanoids in the Wachowskis' Jupiter Ascending, which might, maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe all of human life is going to be harvested so rich people on another planet can live 1,000 years. Don't know. Just tell us. I don't think, and that's why I don't believe necessarily. At the end of the day, do I really think that there's aliens? Do I really think there's ancient astronauts? I'd like to think there is. But I'd also like to believe that if there really were, they would just tell us. Because the way it is now, aliens just crash. We reverse their technology. We put their weird bodies on ice. Whether there's reptilians or Nordics and they can read your souls, whatever the fuck it is, bring it on! I want to see it before I'm too old to appreciate it. But anyway, Disclosure Day did nothing for me in that arena. And by the way, maybe the Nordics are like Ilea, the Deltans in Star Trek. They're practicing the ways of love. Show me, bring it on. Come on, man. Many forms of pleasuring. I want to see that. Here's another article I wanted to read. This one it's from KGET Bakersfield, and it was written by Rick Bentley. By the way, that BBC article, I don't think I said the name of the author. It was Nicholas Barber wrote that article, and he published it 3 days ago. So Nicholas Barber wrote that BBC article, if you want to find it. And this one, again, it comes from KGET Bakersfield, and it was written by Rick Bentley. A better name for Disclosure Day would be Disappointment Day. Director Steven Spielberg has crafted a beautiful-looking film designed to pose life-changing questions, but the script by David Koepp ranges from meandering to laughable. It has serious problems. The film starts with a strong premise, based on the recurring Spielberg theme of focusing on the evils of corporate America that is only out-villainized by the government and military. Daniel Kellner, played by Josh O'Connor, is a young cybersecurity expert who wants to blow the whistle on a major cover-up. While he is eluding the bad guys, Kansas City weather forecaster Margaret Fairchild is having an intergalactic meltdown on the air. She suddenly can speak multiple languages, including a way of speaking based on mathematics. She also has gained the power to slip into the psyche of others, which, of course, because, alien technology will just help you do that. Looking to stop the pair is Noah Scanlon, the head of the Wardex Corporation. He says the world isn't ready for a real close encounter of the third kind, but it's obvious he's more motivated by how alien technology has been used to make a fast buck and him dealing with his own demons, like the death of his wife, because, of course, Daniel is joined in his efforts to escape by Jane, a former nun who lost her way. She provides the only real thread in the story that weaves the big topic issue of religion. Instead of combining that thread with other smart plot lines, Koepp shifts the film to a semi-action movie. There are a few car chases, a couple of shootouts, and numerous escapes. They're fun, but instead of being the cause of a pump of adrenaline, they slow the movie's weak momentum. The first 2 acts are tolerable, especially because of a standout performance by Emily Blunt. She's the conduit for the emotional moments of the production and gives each one a depth that far surpasses the pedestrian writing. Spielberg was banking on his reputation to dazzle any filmgoers who might question any one of his weak situations. Take, for example, the 3 mysterious alien objects that look like the ends of a futuristic jump rope. They give anyone with an ungloved hand the ability to project their mind, turn on lights, or create invisibility. There's little explained in terms of origin, purpose, or abilities. They're just necessary props. This was another thing. This weird alien do-all technology. Did we make that? Did we reverse engineer it? But it's insinuated that we are trying to learn to use it, that it's dangerous to human beings, and you have to have your body monitored when using it, as we see. But what is the purpose of those things? Like, is that all that aliens are interested in doing? The sequence where the evil corporate agents can't see the invisible objects masked by the alien objects ends up playing like a slapstick comedy. Those are just a few of the moments that feel out of place here. Spielberg fell victim to forgetting there's a line between fantasy and farce, and he obliterated the line. So much of Disclosure Day is like smoke and mirrors. An exact replica of a person's childhood home is recreated 30 years later down to a box of broken crayons. It looks good, but how such detail was created is something the filmmaker is banking on that no one will question. Spielberg's other big mistake is rehashing his own material. There are so many references to his Close Encounters that the 1977 movie should have had top billing. Now, that was a quick review. It's not necessarily the most insightful thing in the world, but it quickly conveys many of the thoughts that I had. Disclosure Day did nothing new. It had nothing to say. And more importantly, it didn't have anything to say about what disclosure would really mean today. It didn't address anything that's been going on for the last decade in terms of the UAP phenomenon and everybody that's come forward and whistleblowers and the government. And I mean, they're literally releasing UFO files now. I mean, disclosure's happening in drips and drabs, but our own government's behind it. Probably because it's all a bunch of hooey. I'd love for it all to be real, but I haven't seen anything that's convinced me yet. Now, there's one more article I want to read that isn't directly related to Disclosure Day, but it is related if you all are For All Mankind fans, and why shouldn't you be? By the way, the spin-off series Star City is so good. 4 episodes have dropped. And by the way, if you've never seen For All Mankind, you can dip into Star City because it goes back in time and it deals with when the Soviets beat America to the moon. That's the premise of the alternate history of Star City. You can start watching Star City now and then pick up For All Mankind. It's that good. But before I get into this article, let me see if anybody here, if there's any super chats or anybody wants to speak. I haven't even looked, and I apologize for that. And oh my God, there's lots of super chats. Darth Plato says, clever show title, Rob. The Met Gala was the disclosure. Major Chai Chai says, I prefer an Earth carried on the back of a turtle. You know? No, you don't. You really want aliens. Jamie Sunday says, I think I hated this film. I really felt like I wasted my time watching this. It's so strange. I love Spielberg. Me too. Darth Plato says, member call tomorrow. There isn't going to be a member call tomorrow, and that is on me. I apologize. Darth Plato has been a member of this channel for 64 months, and I appreciate that. Darth Plato is the official philosopher king of this channel. Dark Forces Universe has been a member for 49 months and says, I was 12 in 1975 when I saw Jaws. My memory of it was after the movie, hearing someone in the men's room stall next to me throwing up. Royston Bailey says, who could realistically save Star Trek? To be honest, I don't think anyone you've ever heard of. I think if someone is going to save Star Trek, it's got to be somebody that loves the show, that has to be very smart. I think Star Trek, like Doctor Who, like Star Wars, has been run into the ground. And, even me, people have said, well, Rob, I might, if I was put in charge of Star Trek, I would hand pick people that I know could come in and at least write a good first season. But, people talk about Ron Moore and Terry Matalas. Love both of those guys, and they do a fine job. But I'd rather see, they've done it. I'd rather see what they're going to do. I can't wait to see God of War. Ron Moore co-created For All Mankind and Star City. Terry Matalas has the outstanding Vision Quest series. Outstanding. I mean, I assume it's outstanding, but it's an outstanding science fiction series. I can't wait to see it. But I would rather see him do that than remake Star Trek. I really would, because give me something new. Major Chai Chai said, I'd gladly be Scully to your Mulder on Aliens. Well, you can be that. Major Chai Chai, you'd give me the credibility I need. We should do our own, we should hit the road together and go find out what's up. Let's see. Royston Bailey says, Rob Ager Collective Learning Film Analysis channel is good. I don't know that channel. Is it Rob Ager? I'll have to look at that. Stephen Langford says, hey, Rob, Star Trek TNG Season 3 finale. What was your reaction and what were you thinking when it ended with Jean-Luc Picard as a Borg on screen? Thanks. Loved it. What's not to love? I mean, I absolutely loved The Best of Both Worlds. The end of that was mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. It was incredible. But I didn't know it was coming. Nobody knew it was coming. So I was surprised. So I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Is it the Erdman? The Erdman. No drones. You can even use a drone in your office. Remember, Chatsoon? Yes. Oh, that's it's Mr. Erdman. Okay. I was like, why was I seeing that? Hello. Yeah, there's no drones. Yes, we have to do a member chat. I'm so late. I'm going to do like 3 in a row, so I'll catch up. It's so weird. There's no drones. There's no tech. There's no fucking helicopters chasing anybody around. People jump on a train, and you'd think that they would follow the train with a helicopter, but they don't. And then in the next scene, they're just walking across a field. Like, you don't have drones. You don't have... It's a terrible screenplay. Royston Bailey says, maybe the film was purposely made to be underwhelming. Psyop Steven, I don't believe in that. I don't think that he would intentionally do something underwhelming. Royston Bailey says, Gen X and Z should make films together. No, you know why? Because Gen X would fire all the Gen Z people that didn't feel like coming into work today. Yeah, I wasn't feeling it, so I couldn't come in. You're out of here. Ostracized Child sent in a sticker, a thank you sticker for $10. Thank you, I appreciate that. D's Webos 1978 has been a member for 43 months. Joe Panora says, I was confused. Spielberg said Christians will question their faith after watching Disclosure Day when the nun in the movie said, why limit God's creations to earth? I left confused. What was the point? I thought that was great. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is the nun that you've seen in the trailer. One of the characters asks her and says, look, in Genesis talks about creating, or I think it was in Genesis, and the nun says, she said created things on earth, uses the word earth, so it doesn't contradict the fact that God may very well have created life outside of earth. Deez Webo said, Rob, I want to believe I loved Disclosure Day. Well, I'm glad you loved it. It's good to love things. I'm glad somebody did. Jay Bling says, I had mixed feelings toward Disclosure Day. Big gripe, why wouldn't a certain character just be forthcoming about what's going on? I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. The Erdman says, also, isn't Star City awesome? You got me hooked on For All Mankind, the one show I can never seem to get my friends to watch. I saw someone refer to Star City as similar to Andor, and I totally agree. Star City is masterful. Star City is one of the great genre shows of all time, as is For All Mankind. So I'm glad you're watching it. It's great stuff. So, let me read this last article. It's an old article. It's from Astronomy, the former magazine, astronomy.com. But I wanted to read this because I think it's worth reading. It's from the May 2012 issue. So this is, what is this, 14 years old? Is that right? So this is from the May 2012 issue of Astronomy magazine. What happens if we detect alien life? Scientists have been listening for signals from extraterrestrial civilizations for decades, but what would they do if they actually heard one? Editor's note, this article was originally published in the May 2012 issue of Astronomy. We have never heard a peep from aliens, but improved technology is speeding up the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI. So what happens if today's silence suddenly gives way to tomorrow's discovery of alien life? By the way, subsequently, we have discovered exoplanets that their atmospheres insinuate that there could be either life or civilizations on those planets. But obviously we can't prove it. So what happens if today's silence suddenly gives way to tomorrow's discovery of alien life? Would the world rejoice in the news that someone's out there? Would euphoria engulf humanity, kind of like New York when the Knicks won Game 4? As Nobel Prizes are doled out like the after-dinner mints? That's one view. But many people think the discovery would be hushed up as quickly as a mafia informant, assuming that the public couldn't handle the news. Or, scarier still, kept secret for fear that an unauthorized response would tell a hostile race exactly where to send their interstellar battle wagons. That's, of course, the Dark Forest idea. That's melodramatic enough. But has any serious consideration gone into what happens when our efforts to detect cosmic intelligence pay off, and we find a blip of a signal in the sea of radio noise that pours into SETI antennas? Some think that addressing that question, even in a speculative way, is hubristic at best and wildly presumptuous at worst. After all, SETI scientists have been torquing their telescopes towards celestial targets for more than half a century without ever detecting such a signal. Except maybe the WOW signal. If we haven't won the ET lottery in all that time, why worry about what would happen if we got the winning ticket? Simple. SETI researchers are buying more tickets all the time, and the chances of scoring the big one keep going up. As computer power improves and new detection technology comes out of the labs, the search is accelerating. Keep in mind this article is 14 years old. Unless the aliens are excessively secretive or simply non-existent, we could find evidence for their presence within decades. So again, then what? In the spring of 1960, astronomer Frank Drake performed the first modern SETI experiment, whimsically dubbed Project Ozma, after L. Frank Baum's fictional Queen of Oz. What few people realize is that he actually detected something. While pointing his antenna at the nearby sun-like star Epsilon Eridani, Drake heard a strong hammering signal. Surprised by how quickly his search succeeded, he wondered, well, what do we do now? Drake answered his own question by rigging up additional equipment, and he soon proved that the throbbing bleats from his loudspeaker were terrestrial interference, not Eridanians trying to phone our home. Project Ozma could tune to only one frequency at a time, but today's SETI receivers are simultaneously monitoring hundreds of millions of channels. Consequently, picking up a signal is neither remarkable nor rare. A few dozen typically come up with each scan. Naturally, no one gets very excited about this. Instead, researchers rely on sophisticated software to perform the tedious task of deciding whether these signals are likely to be alien intelligence or, as in Drake's case, just more human-caused radio static. Only rarely does any signal survive this automatic scrutiny. But if and when this happens, a series of additional tests occur. Eventually, the astronomers running the experiment ask someone at another observatory to verify the detection, to rule out equipment bugs, coding errors, or pranks. And we've seen this both in movies like The Arrival and in Contact. The scenario for handling a signal is briefly described in a document developed under the auspices of the International Academy of Astronautics and referred to as SETI detection protocols. These best practices boil down to this. 1. Carefully verify that the signal is truly extraterrestrial. 2. Inform other scientists and the public. And 3. Seek international approval before transmitting any reply. Here are the abridged SETI detection protocols. Confirmed detections. If the verification process confirms that a signal is due to extraterrestrial intelligence, the discoverer shall report this conclusion in a full and complete open manner to the public, the scientific community, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, as long as he's not busy besmirching Israel. Ha ha ha. All data necessary for the confirmation of the detection should be made available to the international scientific community through publications, meetings, conferences, and other appropriate means. The discovery should be monitored. Any data bearing on the evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence should be recorded and stored permanently to the greatest extent feasible and practicable. Practicable? If the evidence of detection is in the form of electromagnetic signals, observers should seek international agreement to protect the appropriate frequencies by exercising the extraordinary procedures established within the World Administrative Radio Council of the International Telecommunications Union. Now, let me just chime in here and say one of the things that's in Disclosure Day that I do agree with is when Mr. O'Connor mentions, his character mentions that this information belongs to the people of the world. Now remember, if we pick up a signal, an extraterrestrial signal that is being beamed at the Earth, this ain't a secret. This isn't something that should be kept from us. This is information that human beings need. It is essentially, it might not be the word of our Creator, but it is the word that is coming from the universe to us. There's no reason it should be covered up, because who are they, who is anybody to take away information from human beings that is out there in the cosmos that's getting to us? It's just that we're not looking for it. Our everyday lives are a little bit busy. Post-detections. A post-detection task group under the auspices of the SETI Permanent Committee has been established to assist in matters that may arise in the event of a confirmed signal, and to support the scientific and public analysis by offering guidance, interpretation, and discussion of the wider implications of the detection. And this is the response to the signals. In the case of the confirmed detection of a signal, signatories to this declaration will not respond without first seeking guidance and consent of a broadly representative international body such as the United Nations. And this is from the International Academy of Astronautics, Commission 1 Space Physical Sciences meeting on October 2nd, 2011. These are all patently good ideas that seem to suggest that everyone would handle a discovery soberly. I don't know if I would. However, such interesting signals are bound to provoke a response that's both messy and confused, because verification will take many days at the least. During all that time, word of possible detection will surely spread via blogs and tweets from the researchers themselves. There is no policy of secrecy in SETI, so you can bet that long before any official press conference announcing that we found the aliens, you'll have heard about it many times over. Indeed, you should brace yourself for plenty of future false alarms caused by signals that, at first blush, look promising. This has occurred in the past and shows the error of those who think that a discovery should or could be covered up. Any real detection would be a headliner, everyone agrees. SETI practitioner Paul Horowitz of Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, said it would easily be the most interesting discovery in human history. Journalists would go wild at least for a month or two. or a week or two with our attention spans. Astronomer Jill Tarter, who heads the SETI Institute's listening efforts in Mountain View, California, concurs. The general public will be in an excited state for a while, fueled by the media, but UFO enthusiasts will yawn because they knew it all along. A public reaction of initial enthusiasm and not mayhem as precedent. Consider the 1996 announcement that NASA scientists had found fossilized Martian microbes in a meteorite. That story ran in the New York Times with billboard-sized headlines for 3 days. The public's reaction to the possible detection of life beyond Earth? That's interesting. Tell us more. The meteorite story was a stunted reprisal of astronomer Percival Lowell's reports of Martian canals a century earlier. Again, people were tantalized, but few seemed to panic. Early results. Of course, in 1996, no one felt threatened by dead protozoans, even if they were from Mars. But SETI searches for intelligent life, and given that human beings are still the new kids on the technological block, consider that we've only had radio technology for 100 years, you can be pretty sure that anyone we hear will be more advanced than us, possibly much more advanced. That might sound unsettling, but most people don't see it that way. A 2005 survey by the National Geographic Channel, the SETI Institute, and the University of Connecticut found that 70% of Americans said they would feel excited and hopeful to learn about a signal from ET. Only 20% confessed that they would be anxious and nervous. I would say because we've been programmed by Steven Spielberg to think that these aliens will be nice and cuddly and benevolent. Leave it to the Chinese to give us the second part of the three-body problem trilogy, The Dark Forest. These aliens, these Shanti, they'll fuck you up. Wait till the second season comes out. It ain't going to be pretty. Spoiler alert. Then again, perhaps that's not too surprising, given that any transmission we discover will likely be from beings many hundreds of light years distant, a seemingly safe remove. And at first, we won't know much about more than the signal's existence. But you could bet your paycheck that every telescope on Earth will aim straight for the transmission. Is a star waiting there? Does it have planets? In the rush to learn more, even a stalled project like NASA's Terrestrial Planet Finder might see new life as scientists shake it out of its comatose state, infuse it with new vigor, and hurl it into orbit. There are some things, now we've got, obviously, the James Webb Telescope, which can tell us a lot. There are some things we could learn quickly about the signal's source. Within 1,000 light years lie tens of millions of stars. Consequently, a few arc minutes separate them in the sky, on average. A high-resolution radio telescope, such as the Jansky Very Large Array in New Mexico, has a beam size of about 5 arc seconds at the commonly used SETI frequency of 1420 megahertz. It would have little difficulty pinpointing which star hosts the detected aliens. We'll all know exactly where they live. And that's not all. 2 decades ago, radio astronomers Jim Cords and Woodruff Sullivan considered what we might learn by looking at the subtle variations of any alien signal. This includes small frequency shifts due to the Doppler effect, which alters a signal's frequency according to its motion, as well as intensity changes due to the atmosphere of ET's planet, or simply its daily rotation. Careful measurement could theoretically pin down the length of the alien's day and year, the size of their world, the presence of moons, possibly even information about their atmosphere and magnetic fields. All of that would be tasty fodder for the technologically inclined, but everyone else is going to ask an obvious question. What are the aliens saying? That, of course, assumes that they're saying anything, that they've included a message in the signal. After all, the extraterrestrials might withhold commentary if they want us to reply first, or perhaps so they can gauge what level of conversation is appropriate. But let's suppose that ET is trying to tell us something. Just getting the message bits could be hard. SETI observations add up incoming static for seconds or minutes to increase the sensitivity to weak signals. This is completely analogous to astronomical photography. The longer the exposure time, the fainter the stuff you can image. Unfortunately, just as long exposure would obliterate the rapid flashes of an optical pulsar, so too would these long SETI observations smooth away any message. For example, the alien transmission included a television-type signal. Researchers would need an antenna roughly 10,000 times larger than most of today's radio telescopes to see the picture. Building such an enormous antenna would require impressive amounts of money and time. However, after a signal's detection, it's reasonable to assume that the research money would be practically unlimited, unlike today's situation. In the meantime, the public would be confronted with the fact of cosmic company. We wouldn't know what they're like, nor what we might learn from them, only that they exist. Anthropologist Ben Finney, if you're a Star Trek fan, that's funny, of the University of Hawaii at Manoa has predicted that an interpretation industry would quickly sprout. Facile pundits, who's facile? Facile pundits who, out of conviction or merely greed, will explain to the masses what contact means and how we should feel about it. And in particular, how should religions react? Research in this area is lacking, but most mainstream theologians have expressed the upbeat view that our belief systems could adapt. As Vatican Observatory astronomer Brother Guy, here's a tough one, Consolmongo has said, if your religion has survived millennia, if it can handle Copernicus, Galileo, and even Darwin, then E.T. should eventually prove palatable. Mainstream religion might easily incorporate the discovery, but fundamentalists will have a harder time. They are less willing to accept a cosmic circumstance that's not found in their scripture. And unless you're inclined to consider seraphim, Nephilim, or angels as alien beings, most religions don't anticipate the presence of intelligent life on other worlds. An exception is Mormonism. The fundamentalists would likely rail against the discovery, claiming it's just Satan tempting you, according to sociologist Bill Bainbridge of George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Without doubt, learning of other beings amongst the star fields of the Milky Way would be discomforting to some, but the most profound consequences of a SETI detection would surely be the long-term impacts, and these would affect everyone. The degree to which a signal would alter the lives of our descendants depends on whether we could decode any attached message. This might sound like a tractable problem, merely a matter of time and effort. After all, humans eventually deciphered hieroglyphics, linear B, and other messages that once seemed as inscrutable as teenage behavior. But the universe is old, and consequently the content of any message might simply be incomprehensible to our 3-pound hominid brains. Still, let's take the sunny view and assume that we eventually learn what the aliens are saying, because, as noted, they're likely to be well in advance of us. The information might include such practical topics as all of physics and astronomy, the extent and nature of cosmic biology and intelligence, the whether and how of faster-than-light travel, and many other things that are the providence of science fiction today. To suddenly learn such matters would trigger a sharp discontinuity in our species' history, a kind of wormhole to a future that might otherwise reach only after thousands of millions of years. Aside from such a torrent of knowledge, we would confront the fact that the differences among humans are of trivial import compared to the gulf between extraterrestrials and ourselves. Some people, such as SETI's Tartar, suggest that this would lead to more human harmony and less worry that we're on the road to destruction. After all, if they've survived their technical adolescence, then we could too. Sociologist Don Tartar of the University of Alabama, Huntsville, is less sanguine. He notes that the idea of the world's peoples coming together in sweetness and light, popular in the early days of space exploration with the first pictures of Earth as a small blue orb in a vast dark sky, was shattered by subsequent wars and terrorist attacks. We're back to the usual conflict and competition. And what about a response? If we know where the aliens live, do we dare reply with our own shout-out? Or would that, as some, I don't know what that means, aver, merely expose our planet to possible future destruction because we've given away our existence and position? Again, the Dark Forest. In fact, while no one can say whether aliens would be peaceable or pugnacious, we've been sending radio, television, and mostly visibly radar signals into space inadvertently for more than 90 years. Any society that has the capability to travel interstellar distances and threaten our world would easily pick up these leaked signals. Indeed, by using their own sun as a gravitational lens, the nearest could theoretically see the lights from our cities. Any deliberate reply from us would simply add information they already have. Frankly, predicting the truly durable consequences of a SETI success is a fool's errand. Consider if members of the Spanish court in 1492 had a written treatise on what the discovery of a new continent might eventually mean. An interesting exercise, but not one likely to have much currency a few hundred years down the road. But this much we can say. If SETI succeeds, we'll have proof that biology is as much a part of the cosmos as pulsars and pockmarked planets. And while instant brotherhood is unlikely to erupt suddenly on Earth, we'll at least know we're neither the crown of our creation or of creation, nor even particularly exceptional. For as long as our species exists, we'll be aware that we're just one more duck in a row. And you can be sure that news will ruffle a few feathers. Now, I thought that was worth reading, especially when you consider the idea of what we believe with UAP phenomenon and disclosure. One of the things about Disclosure Day that I really also felt was very disappointing. Our current popular culture, now keep in mind this is the current popular culture that has some fringe people believing the earth is flat, and that even though Roger Avery, I love him, talks about the fact that we've been gaslit and there's hundreds of years missing from our history. And there's a lot of other people that have a lot of interesting claims about all kinds of different things, alternate timelines, different realities. Our idea currently of what disclosure is, many people, and myself kind of included, even though on one hand I believe because I want to believe, on the other hand it's a big stretch. We believe, or some believe, at least in the disclosure community, that aliens have either visited us or are currently here on Earth. Some people believe there are different species of aliens. My beloved Nordics, what do I got to do? Give me a call. Or reptilians, or greys, or non-corporeal, whatever you want to believe. And every one of those things is a huge stretch. We want to believe that maybe they've been involved on Earth for hundreds or if not thousands of years. That they've been here, they've inspired our cultures. Now, all of this has been dealt with in popular culture. All of it. Like in The Outer Space Connection in 1975. Eric von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods. Prometheus, the movie. The idea that aliens have been visiting us, we've accepted these ideas in pop culture. As a matter of fact, not only have we accepted them, we want them to be true. That's the funny part about this, is do I want to believe that aliens are currently active on Earth right now? Do I want to believe that there's an alien base underwater off the coast of California? Yes. Yes, I do. I want to believe that. I want to believe that the people of the world are reverse engineering technologies. I want to believe that there really is this gigantic, amazing power source under the Great Pyramids. I want to believe that Stonehenge is some kind of a clock or some kind of whatever it is to communicate with whomever, or the ancient druids knew what was going on. I want to believe all of it. And I think we all want to believe all of it. As imagination connoisseurs, why wouldn't we want it to happen? We would. And I think that nowadays, I just feel that the idea that somebody's been able to keep this a secret kind of proves that it's not true. Because if it were true, nobody would be able to keep it a secret. No one took their iPhone into Area 51 and took a little snapshot. And the problem is, all of these ideas about UAPs and everything, these are things that have already been popularized in our entertainment. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm from Washington State. One of the earliest big reports of flying saucers was famously happening on Mount Rainier, or in the skies above Mount Rainier. So I even come, in my home state, UFOlogy goes back, to the mid-20th century. Unfortunately, why is it that so many of our visions of what UAPs are have something analogous in our fiction. And I understand. You know, our fiction, I've often said, the best fiction is the most truthful. So people can hold me to that. But it's very difficult for me to believe in the UAP phenomenon, because I also know that I've been so programmed over all the things that I've been reading and all the things that I have seen, that it's very difficult. Why is it that my only image is, why are UAPs all flying saucers or triangles or whatever? Why? You know, it's almost like everything that we've seen, we already have seen on movies. And the idea, if you listen to Bryce Zabel's podcast, it's because that was intentional. Which, of course it is. I mean, if you want to keep that narrative going, it's a tough one. Ultimately, Steven Spielberg let me down with this one. I thought Disclosure Day was a movie that was sort of really, it was tone deaf, and it's almost as if David Koepp has not kept up with what has been going on in disclosure circles, or what's been happening in the media, or has he been reading congressional reports. It's almost like they didn't do any research at all. Because like the article said, the BBC called it, The X-Files, the second episode of The X-Files in 1993, Deep Throat, did a better job of addressing disclosure than Disclosure Day did. And that's a problem. And I dearly love The X-Files. And The X-Files did it better with a lot less money, a lot less time. And that's a bummer. And now, do I like Steven Spielberg any less? No. Does it diminish his genius and what he's provided to me my entire life? No. You know, I kind of equate Steven Spielberg to Stephen King, because they were kind of coming up at the same time. You know, the movie Carrie came out in 1975, and so did Jaws. And Stephen King had written, you know, Spielberg had done Night Gallery, and Spielberg had done Duel. And to me, classic Steven Spielberg, you know, 70s and 80s Steven Spielberg, totally classic, just like Stephen King. I mean, to me, Stephen King's classic period where he could do no wrong sort of ended with Cujo. But I didn't know he was all coked to the gills and didn't remember writing that book. Things change. Have I loved all of Stephen King's books? No. Do I have shelves of his books? Yes. I love Stephen King. I love Steven Spielberg. They have journeyed with me on my life, or during my life. I have continued to enjoy everything that they've done. Not equally. But you know what? If he puts out a book, if Stephen King puts out a book like Doom a Key, or Spielberg wants to remake a movie and turn it into Always, I'll go there. Does Spielberg disappoint me with something like Hook? Yes. Did Stephen King write Insomnia, which I spent a lot of money getting a slipcased version of, and I read it and went, what the fuck is this? Does that diminish them in my overall worldview? No. Both Stephen King and Steven Spielberg are geniuses that have brought so much joy to my life over the majority of my life. So just because I was monumentally disappointed by Disclosure Day doesn't mean my love of Steven Spielberg will wane or wax with the moon. It is eternal, my love, and I hope he makes another movie, and I really hope he talks about making a Western. I got one for you, buddy. The movie that nobody can seem to crack, that I would love to see you crack, Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. You know it. You know it. Steve, it's not too late, and you know how. Anyway, I got letters to read if you want to hang out with me some more, because I got people's letters to read. Let me see if anyone sent in. I don't think anyone sent in a... Darth Plato sent in a tip. Said, hey, Rob, I'm going to be on a panel on For All Mankind this Sunday on Lance's channel, The Outcasts Creative. Well, that's cool. I was on Anti-Derivative Jill's podcast talking about For All Mankind, but that's cool. Everybody tune in and listen to Darth Plato on Lance's channel, The Outcasts Creative. That's cool. I'm in. Oh, people ask about the tip link. The tip link is in the description. By the way, I also want to say that our ongoing movie poster sale, we just dropped Hitchcock today. Alfred Hitchcock. The link is in the description. For those of you who don't know, I was able to acquire a collection that's been sequestered away for 45 years. It's from the National Screen Service Corporation. There's over 4,000 items. And every week we've been putting up more and more items and selling them. We had a Star Wars drop, which surprisingly not a lot of people bought the Star Wars stuff. I know it's expensive, but still, you'll never find a collection of most of this stuff is uncirculated, and the collection is incredible. And people have written in that have bought stuff and said that very thing. And I teamed up with a friend of mine, Gabe, and a friend of mine, Michelle. Gabe has a 100%. He's a hot seller on eBay. Did I say? I keep saying YouTube. It's eBay. It's an eBay sale. Don't call it Evil Bay, even though they take a hell of a lot of money. But you can go to the link now, and we did put up the Hitchcock posters today. It's mostly late Hitchcock, 50s and 60s, but there's some really cool stuff if you're a Hitchcock fan. Some of it's in great, great, great shape. So check that out. The local Rex sends in a super chat and says, I ordered the Superman one sheet from you and it came today. Sweet! By the way, that Superman poster it was in incredible condition. And for those of you, so movie posters up until the mid-'80s were folded from the National Screen Service Corporation. And what I like to do with my posters, what I did was I get them linen backed. And you can watch, there's some people, there's like, I think it's called like 4 Cone Restoration. There's a female-owned business here, I think it's in Canoga Park. And what they do is they restore posters and mount them to linen. So if you have a folded poster, what they do is you'll see, it might freak you out, but they give them a bath. And there's, in the paper, there's acid in the paper that causes yellowing and things. They'll take that out, and then they will put your poster on linen backing, which is reversible, but it takes kind of the folds out of it, and it looks incredible. I think it's called 4 Cone Restoration. Look up poster restoration, female business, but they show you the process. They make some great videos. They're on YouTube, and you can see the process. So if you get, movie posters like Superman the movie, it'll retain their value, and if you have them mounted to linen, they'll last. And by the way, thank you for purchasing the poster. I hope you were happy with it. And I'm going to tell you, I almost kept that. I was like, shit, man. I kept the insert. I kept the Superman insert, which is smaller. But that's Superman one sheet. And then the Superman 2 one sheet, there's both the Advance and the Superman 2 one sheet. I mean, the Superman one, the You'll Believe It Man, the sky, that's Bob Peak. It's so cool. But the Superman 2 one sheet with Superman flying forward, and it says, the 3 outlaws from Krypton descend to Earth to confront the Man of Steel in a cosmic battle for world supremacy, is very, very cool too. But thank you very much for that. I very much appreciate it. Reseller Roasters says, hi, Rob. What did you think of Patrick Gibson as Bond? Good fit for live action. You're talking about First Light. I haven't played it yet. I just haven't had time. But everyone says he's great. I mean, we'll see. Major Chai Chai says, since no call tomorrow, I'm going to go see Cat Chaplin's The Kid at the Indie Cinema or Miyazaki's Ponyo at AMC. Maybe both. Go see both. Which is awesome. Major Chai Chai says, another Robservations tomorrow night. Yes, probably. I'm going to see, Bill Hunt got the rest of the episodes of Star City. So we're going to watch episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8 tomorrow. So I'll probably be back in time to do another Robservations. Let's see. Jay Bling says, kind of amused by the Hunting Wives being submitted for comedy at the Emmys, but it made me wonder, Is it off base to suggest comedies and erotic thrillers have more in common than one would think? They really did put The Hunting Wives up for comedy? That seems a little silly to me, but what can you do? By the way, Universal Rock Nerd became a subscriber. I don't know. I mean, look, I like to take my erotic thrillers seriously, but there can be funny erotic thrillers. Skinamax had them all in the 90s. So, yeah. That's actually a good point. Joe the lawyer says, so what went wrong? How could no one have told Spielberg that it was so bad? Didn't they screen test it? Did no one have the balls to tell him? Well, I just think, look, I think some people just don't know. They don't know. And, you know, David Koepp and Spielberg have worked together for a long time, and I think sometimes people just make things that they don't work. And then, of course, it falls to people to say, well, Rob, what do I know? Which is true. What do I know? Who am I to question what Steven Spielberg has done? But then again, I question Hook. So, yeah. Anyway, it's not a bad thing. but look, he made a movie. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I think everybody wanted it to be great, though. Kiss My Grits Florida says, had Masters of the Universe done a better job marketing to Gen Z and tightened up the script humor, could it have been more successful, or was it always going to fail? I'm an 80s kid and I loved it. It made me smile the whole movie. I thought Masters of the Universe was exactly what it was supposed to be. Look, I think the real problem is, one, Masters of the Universe, the He-Man cartoon series, was not good. I mean, it wasn't good. That movie did that cartoon so it didn't do it. It did the opposite of doing somebody dirty. It did somebody great. I mean, that movie was so much fun to watch. But I think the problem is marketing it to Gen Z. Gen Z has no connection to He-Man. Zero. You know, there's no nostalgic. If anything, they think of He-Man as being new because that Kevin Smith series that they probably didn't like very much anyway. Yeah, there was no Masters of the Universe. They did the best they could, and I understand you want to keep IPs going. And you've got Travis Knight, and you had Guy Dice doing the production design, which I love the look of the film. I loved everybody in it. I thought it was a hoot. But it doesn't belong to, who's it for? Like, you're asking people that were fans of a cartoon series in the early 80s that played with those toys to, in 2026, go out and see a movie that can't, I mean, if you'd made it a Lord of the Rings-esque movie and called it Masters of the Universe, maybe you'd have more appeal to it and denied its, what they were trying. Look, make no mistake. Masters of the Universe was a ploy to reignite the franchise as a merchandisable franchise, which they very might well have done. Because remember, it's Amazon MGM, and they'll put it on streaming, and they probably have big plans for it. So the economics around whether it failed or not are very different than if it was a company other than Amazon that made it. So we shall see. I think in the long run, it's going to go on streaming, and people will probably watch it forever. Brandon 23199 says, Rob, I would love to see your show more often. Do you have a set time and day of your show? I hang my head in shame. I don't. Look, I would be much more successful, and I would have 100,000 subscribers, and I would have my YouTube plaque if I was more steady. But the problem is, in real life, you know, I do the John Campea show during the day, and I'm working on a number of different other projects now that sometimes I have something to say, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just don't have time. And to be honest, I'm finding it harder and harder to find subjects to pontificate about. You know, I mean, how many more times can I talk about Star Wars or Star Trek? I mean, I am very excited about Spider-Man, and I'm very excited about Vision Quest, and I'm very excited about Doomsday. So I'm sure I'll have a lot to say about those things. And but it's getting harder to talk about things and to find things to talk about. Although I will say this, I've really been enjoying doing this show more in the last couple weeks than I have in a long time. I'm having a lot more fun doing it. Let's jump into some letters. Our friend Omar is back. Omar used to write letters all the time. Then he disappeared. People grow up, people come, they go. Omar, 94, is back. Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. Disclosure Day is the return of Steven Spielberg and Aliens, with the story revolving around the idea that humans are not alone in the universe. However, I've noticed something with that. It's really hard to come up with something truly original, and the problem with stories about realizing aliens have been among us is how there have been several versions of that done. So any new film with aliens being among us, the plot will have comparisons to films which did it already. John Carpenter's film They Live, based on a short story, has that plot line of aliens living among us in secret, with someone trying to expose it after finding out and going on the run. While different in terms of story approach, Alien Nation and District 9 have similar stories where we see the world finding out humans are not alone at the beginning. And when they land on Earth, and then the films jump to the post-encounter world where the aliens are assimilated with the humans. In the case of Spielberg, he produced the Men in Black series based on the comic, which has a premise of aliens already being amongst us, but with the stories revolving around an agency keeping it secret. For the record, even if these stories have been done to death, any new movie which does a similar story can still be good. The problem is, even if you do a similar story, the question you have to ask is, what do you do differently? As going on about it from a different approach is how to make recycled stories refreshing. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, it's good to see you back here again, and you're right. The problem is, now, is Disclosure Day, let's face it, is coming, and if you see Spielberg speak, it's coming from a place of actually believing that there are either UAP phenomenon is real, there is disclosure to be had, we are not alone in the universe. My only problem is the movie doesn't do a very good job of presenting any of that information in a plausible way. It's more of a, if you change the name of Disclosure Day to something else, I think it would be more palatable to me. The problem is, by invoking the word disclosure, you bring along with it all of this baggage of what's been going on in the last 10 years. And that's where I had a problem with it. That's where it didn't really work for me. This one comes from Jonathan Namila. Jonathan Namila writes, hello, the Duke of Dope Discourse, the master of fun and wonder, the sommelier of sci-fi, the existential Mr. Rogers, the king of awe and wonder, Robert Burnett. Hi, Rob. I just saw Masters of the Universe, and I gotta say, they did it. A nearly perfect adaptation of the He-Man 90s cartoon comes to life. I love how Travis Knight was able to balance the humor and serious tone of the Masters of the Universe world. I love the Earth moments with Adam, and I love how it all paid off and tied to the ending scenes of the film, and helped build the emotional connection to who Adam was and who he became, and the power that was inside him the whole time. And the sword of Grayskull was just a tool to get Adam there. Jared Leto's Skeletor was an Oscar-worthy performance and one of the best performances since Dallas Buyers Club. He has found his blockbuster character. He gives me chills and was a surreal balance of being funny but extremely serious, Skeletor, and I enjoy all of his funny comebacks. And man couldn't care less about his minions. This Oscar-worthy performance that should, at the very least, be considered for an Oscar nomination. Our He-Man was wonderful, too. Nicholas Galazine gave real emotional depth and gravitas to the role. He-Man has the power. Wow! That transformation scene was one of the greatest scenes in current cinematic history. Tila was a warrior goddess from Eternia. Camila Mendez was nothing short of astounding in every way. I must say she and all the cast looked the part. You can tell they trained for hours to get in Masters of the Universe shape. Just wow. I love Man-at-Arms, played by Idris Elba. Love how he kept protecting Tila and Adam, how he trained them to be warriors of Eternia. I loved how Man-at-Arms had a couple of heartfelt moments during the film. The soundtrack to Masters of the Universe was one of the greatest of all time, with Brian May of Queen. Seriously, what's going on there was that like a page from the 90s. Battle Cat was awesome, but not used in the film enough. Overall, it's my new favorite film of 2026. I give it 5 stars and no notes. I can't wait to own this on Blu-ray in the fall. I have the power. With the power of Grayskull Everyone go watch it, and it will be one of the best times you have at the movies. We need that sequel. On a fun note, I have this moment for you, Rob. So what do you personally do if you were an A-list Hollywood celebrity and you discover there was a lost cinematic universe that you had no clue about, and the whole foundation was already built a 30-story saga with 30 foundational songs also built, and here comes the ultimate twist. You own 100% of that cinematic universe and 100% ownership to shape it any way you see fit. It's the whole sandbox for your own creativity. What do you do with it? What's your reaction to this discovery? Would you track down the creator or let them be? I love to hear your thoughts, Rob. It may exist or it may not, but what if? On that note, everyone has a story to tell, and all you have to do is listen. Rob, I listen. What's your story? Have a better night. That's an interesting question. Let me take a drink. Well, first of all, you'd be hard-pressed to find a franchise that I didn't know anything about. And I guess I would have to really think long and hard and decide. Well, I can tell you a story. There is a franchise like you described. And there has been talk of being on the periphery involved with it in some way, shape, or form, and there's something I would like to do with it. It's just like you described, and I know exactly what I would do with it. The problem is I don't have the rights to this franchise, and the person who controls the rights is very picky about what they would do with them. But I think it would be a great franchise. The problem is it is almost unknown here in the United States. So it would be a difficult thing. But, I think, like, for instance, the Foundation series. Many people know that it's based on Asimov's books. But I don't think a lot of people have read Foundation, and the people that have bitch and moan and complain. But the Foundation series has turned out to be pretty good. The last season was really, really good. Now, is it a breakthrough runaway hit because it's on Apple? No, and I think because it's more intellectually challenging, it doesn't have the populist appeal that a Star Wars does. But it is possible to take a franchise. Look, my overall, since you asked the question, how would I approach any franchise? I would always go back to first principles. Because if a franchise succeeded, no matter where it succeeded because of what it is. And the idea that you would want to change those first principles is a mistake. Everybody fails when they do that. Franchises that exist, you can update them. And I'll give you a perfect example of one of my favorite franchise upgrades that is running right now is the upgrade, the reboot of Space Battleship Yamato, or as we know it in America, Star Blazers. Star Blazers, Space Battleship Yamato, was created in 1974, and it was a huge hit in Japan. And when they released the movie versions, they outgrossed Star Wars. Now, in 2012, they went back and they rebooted the whole series. They started off with the original. It's a serialized story, and they started off with the original storyline. They retold the original storyline. It's one of the best reboots I've ever seen. The writing was terrific. The updated animation was terrific, but the core of the story is great. And if you've never watched Star Blazers, I would go back. I think the whole thing is on Crunchyroll now, but it's incredibly compelling, and it is a perfect reboot in my mind. And right now, Rebel 3199, which is sort of a retelling of the third series, the Bowler Wars with other things thrown in. I actually have not started 3199 yet. I'm waiting till it's all finished and I can watch it all the way through. But so already they've done Space Battleship Yamato 2199, 2202, 2205, and now 3199, Rebel 3199. And it's terrific. So if that's what I would do something along those lines. Let's see who this is interesting. Let me see who wrote this letter. This letter comes from Arvin D. Arvin D. Now there's a picture in this. I don't have this set up to have. Well, the picture doesn't have any faces on it anyway. So Arvin D writes this. Hi Rob, I enjoy your show, and as a fellow Gen Xer, I thought I might share a few thoughts. Hopefully you might find this story of some interest. It features a close friend of mine, so I will not name names, but I'll call him B for convenience. When I was 6 in 1976, B and I were in our school playground in London, England, trying to think up a game to play. He mentioned that his father was working on a film which featured a bad guy dressed in black and wearing a black mask that gave him a weird, breathy voice, and a good guy dressed in white, and something about laser swords? This is a vague picture in our heads, and we started hacking away at each other with sticks for swords until a teacher stopped us. As it happened, my friend's father was a producer for Lucasfilm, and the film was obviously Star Wars, but we didn't know that at the time. I found out years later that his father's earlier credits included probably my favorite film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is one reason that Lucas had hired him. I like to tease B that maybe we were the first kids in the world to play at being Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. I never even paid to see the films, but instead was invited to previews and twice to a premiere, and when I think of the amount of original Star Wars toys and merch that I was gifted as a child and then gradually destroyed or lost or shot with my air rifle, it's almost painful. During those years, I was privileged to be able to visit sets at Elstree Studios and see scenes being shot. In Return of the Jedi, B and I were there on the new Death Star when the Emperor arrived by shuttle and was greeted by Vader in the hangar bay filled with stormtroopers. We had to walk through the Dagobah set to get there. I've added a photo here. I've blanked out the faces for privacy. And there is a picture I'd have to get, but I don't have it loaded up. We met Ian McDermott in full scary makeup, Carrie Fisher, Dave Prowse. We were given Revenge of the Jedi sweatshirts to take home. And there is a Revenge of the Jedi shirt in this picture. We got to visit the creature shop where Stuart Freeborn showed us how Yoda's remote control eyes worked. We watched Harrison Ford and Vic Armstrong fight Pat Roach in the Indian mine and played cards with Ke-Huy Quan on set and then played arcade games in Steven Spielberg's office until he politely asked us to leave. A few years later, we stood in the Acme warehouse near the old BBC building and watched Bob Hoskins try and free himself from an imaginary giant magnet using an imaginary black hole while Bob Zemeckis screamed at him over the loud wind machine, "Look at the rabbit! The rabbit's in danger! Now Doom! The rabbit! Doom!" I was always amazed at how rough these scenes looked in real life, how far Harrison Ford's fist missed Pat Roach's face by when he threw a punch, how weak everything sounded. The magic of seeing it all come together with sound effects and music and editing was incredible. So I went to work for B's father when I left school. Nepotism, anyone? I helped with the post-production administration of Last Crusade, and I rescued the Grail diary before it was thrown out. I kept it for a few days, to study, of course, before returning it to my boss. I got to work with Elliot Scott on Hook, doing research in London for the art department in America. I photographed buildings and drew references of the Peter Pan statue in Hyde Park so it could be recreated in the studio in L.A. Another mate of mine was busy playing Watson in Young Sherlock Holmes. I love Young Sherlock Holmes, having great fun interacting with the groundbreaking special effects. He invited me to see his father play Hannibal Lecter at a preview screening of Manhunter. I did not know Brian Cox's son was Watson in Young Sherlock Holmes. As a third assistant director, a glorified T-boy, I lent John Malkovich my cigarette lighter so he could light up before his scene in Alive. I never got it back, but that's okay. I worked on a few TV productions, but eventually made my way back to art college, got a degree, and have been happily designing children's books for many years now. So, why am I telling you this? Partly ego, I suppose. I see many commentators on YouTube who speak angrily with great passion and authority on those times, and I want to say, I was there, man. And then I add, and I can let it go. To say I love those films is an understatement. They were part of my life. I absorbed them. I could probably speak the dialogue with the sound off. Not just those films, but Star Trek, Bond, Planet of the Apes, Logan's Run, Jason and the Argonauts. The list is long for us film nerds. My dad never really went to the cinema, but he dragged me out in 1979 to see Star Trek the Motion Picture, and when it ended, the people in the row in front stood up and one of them said, "Well, now that was very boring," which I couldn't understand because I'd been totally captivated. But I was never a fanatic of any of those properties. To this day, I don't have posters or t-shirts or tattoos, although I have a few personal reminders. Okay, I admit, and a couple of 2001 lobby cards, but mainly good memories. Even by the time Return of the Jedi, I was ready to let Star Wars end. And it had been a great myth for my childhood, but the Ewoks made me cringe, and I'd seen Blade Runner by then. I was kind of disappointed with Last Crusade, me too, and was happy to watch Jones and company ride off into the sunset at what was, for me at age 18, the right moment. I traveled up the American West Coast for 3 months looking for Guitar Heaven. I got bored of Marvel Comics and discovered 2000 AD, the Freak Brothers. Did you ever read DR and Quinch? DR and Quinch, man. That was one of my favorite 2000 AD comics. It was so funny. Alan Moore. Wow, like a vast array of totally lethal weapons. We'll join. I wasn't into fantasy, dragons, elves, and so on, although I had read the Tolkien books as a child. I guess, strictly speaking, Star Wars is my favorite fantasy story, but it's not really sci-fi. I could move on to, I don't want to say better, but maybe more appropriate for my age sci-fi, like 2001 or Ian Banks' Culture novels, which I hope never get the movie treatment, so much would be lost. Classics like Forbidden Planet, The Day the Earth Stood Still, obscure stuff like Dark Star, Seconds, Heart Beeps. You might be the only person who's ever mentioned Heart Beeps on this show. A Boy and His Dog, I have Heart Beeps on DVD. I'm rambling and trying to show off some film knowledge. Sorry, you can do that. That's what this channel's for. Anyway, I suppose my point is, I never signed on to social media, but I dip into YouTube every day, and I quite enjoy the commentaries by yourself and others regarding modern culture. I agree with much of what you say, but I also wonder if you should just, with respect, move on from it. I'm happy to leave it in the past and can revisit it whenever I want. I've not seen any of the new stuff since The Last Jedi, and I understand that currently it's being handled badly, but that seems to be what happens with franchises, isn't it? It's just inevitable. Future generations will sort it out, I guess the same way we used to distinguish between Dracula and The Lost Boys. It's great that we're getting original ideas from YouTubers who are entering filmmaking with projects like Backrooms and Obsession. It would be a shame if they just led to endless sequels and franchise territory, though. Yeah, I really think our man Curry is going to jump onto the Texas Chainsaw bandwagon. Hey, hope springs eternal, and I hope he gets paid. But after what he's going to make on Backrooms, he doesn't need to do Texas Chainsaw. Do something original. Is it just a rose-tinted view I have, or did directors once make great films like Jaws, 2001, Alien, Die Hard, Predator, and then move on to something new, leaving the sequels and the dilution of ideas to other directors? To be fair, I'm not sure if that was always down to the artist's creative choices. Studio politics and money come into it too sometimes. Even Chris Nolan, his films are just too wordy for me, seems to have run out of ideas. Anyone remember Happy Birthday, Wanda June? That was the original retelling of the Odyssey. Or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Heck, even 2001 A Space Odyssey. This new one looks a bit bland, when it should have been bursting with color and weirdness, in my humble opinion. I suppose my point finally is, it would be great if artists and commentators could move on from regurgitating the past 5 or 6 decades and start creating something new and original. Anyway, I've enjoyed your comments. All the best, A. Well, first of all, that's a great letter. What great memories to be at the Pinewood sets of all these things, to actually see it happen and participate. Listen, What a great childhood to have. What great memories. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the great things about Backrooms and Obsession is they are going to be a point of ignition for a lot of younger film fans that maybe didn't get into movie making until they saw them, or maybe thought movies were not for them until they saw these films made by people from their own generation. I think it's exciting to see that Backrooms might be the first IP that comes from YouTube that was turned into a successful film the way it was, which is fascinating because that's kind of the way things should have been happening. Look, I mean, why do I have a die-cast Slave 1 there? You know, why do I have a Runabout over there? Why is Michael Corleone sitting there? Why is there a 2001 astronaut over there? Why is the zombie from Dawn of the Dead over there? Why is Sabretooth there? You know, I look at all the stuff I've surrounded myself with, and it is a lifetime of totemic reminders of things that I've liked. If you think about it, it's really kind of silly. And all of the things that I collected when I was a kid, but they weren't nearly as good as the things I can get today. And, you know, they make me happy. All this stuff makes me happy, but it's kind of worthless, and I get it. At the end of the day, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on books and all this stuff that keeps me going. The only way I can justify it is that, you know, it's helped me make my own stuff, continue to do work. I mean, just this year, I had True Noir come out that I worked on for 2 years to get it all done, and I'm incredibly proud of it. And that True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak, which you can hear wherever you get your audio podcasts, you know, it represents something I've enjoyed radio dramas my whole life. And I was able to make one. And if it's leading to getting to make a feature film, so much the better. But, you know, that's what's kept me going, is that I've been, all this stuff has been inspiring. And I think the real tragedy is that up to a certain point, for most of Hollywood history, up until the 90s, you know, movie making got more and more expensive, but not exorbitantly so. Obviously, you think about a movie like The Hunt for Red October, that was a movie that was made for $30 million. It came out in 1990. $30 million. You watch Hunt for Red October now, you would say it was a lot more expensive than $30 million because it's become par for the course that movies are $100 million, $200 million. Our great big effects films were never that expensive. But what happened was movie making became a global marketplace. You know, before, movies were mostly made for the domestic audience, and of course people still liked American products, so they would travel around the world. Now, the economics of the movie business completely changed. So what people were looking for is, okay, you could make a movie like Hunt for Red October for $30 million, and it would globally make, I don't know, 300 million, 350 million. That was a huge return for that amount of money. But now, as larger and larger corporations, so you talk about late stage capitalism, it's all about making the most money possible. And I understand that when you're owned by larger and larger corporations, the amount of money that you spend, you want to spend $100 million to make $1 billion. And I get it. The problem with that is you have to, if you're going to risk $100 million, there's no room for innovation. And that's why IPs have become king. You have to know what you're doing, so you know that the built-in audience is there that justifies spending the money. I mean, it's unfortunately, a simple economic reality of where we're at. Because you could never make a movie like Hunt for Red October for $30 million like you could in 1989 to have it come out in 1990. And that's sad. Hollywood priced itself out of big budget innovation, unless you're Christopher Nolan or James Cameron. And that's too bad. Because the explosion of genre cinema in the wake of Star Wars was incredible. That's what gave us Blade Runner. We'll never see those days again. Unless, I think that AI filmmaking, the thing about AI filmmaking is it will be a writer's medium. I think that the best, and we're going to start seeing AI produced, whether that's good or bad, movies are going to become more like novels. You're going to see one person making AI feature films from soup to nuts. And it'll be interesting to see how that, for instance, I've been contemplating doing that myself. There's a project that I could probably never get made, but AI has made it possible for me to make it. Now, I wouldn't be shooting it, like a real movie, and I do want I have very specific movie stars I've always wanted in this project, that eventually what's going to happen, I would imagine, is that movie stars will license their likeness out. As a matter of fact, I would imagine that movie stars will have packages, digital packages that are... No, go with me on this. They will have digital packages of themselves that you can get, and you can, depending on what kind of movie, you'll pay a licensing fee. Like if you want, I don't know, Marlon Brando, for instance, and the estate of Marlon Brando, whoever owns, and maybe there'll be entire agencies or a new business that represents this, you will have avatars of every single movie star that ever existed. And you will be able to download whatever era you want. If you want Apocalypse Now Marlon Brando, if you want On the Waterfront Marlon Brando, if you want The Wild One Marlon Brando, you'll be able to download whichever era of Marlon Brando you want for a certain fee, and Marlon Brando will star in your movie. And every single movie star ever somebody will buy that and license it. And for people, anybody who wants to make an AI movie to star these actors, to put actors together that never would have been together, that will happen. I know at first it might be distasteful, but it's going to come down to this technology is so sophisticated. It'll be so sophisticated that, I don't think that anyone's ever going to be able to press a button and get something truly great that's all AI created. You're going to need a human element, and there's going to be taste involved. Every line reading, every edit, every background, every camera lens. Because people are going to start to use, you'll be able to be like, okay, I need a 50 millimeter lens here, I need a 35 millimeter lens here. Whatever you'll be able to pick your focal. It's going to happen. The technology is going in that direction. And when there's more data centers and you'll be able to not pay as many subscriptions, you won't need so many credits, it's going to happen. And that's going to be a weird time to be alive. So we'll see. But right now, movies price themselves out of innovation. We still get a lot of interesting things. Curry Barker could come along and make Obsession for $750,000. And you can get Kane Pixels, who, based on his work on the Backrooms shorts that he made, he's able to get $10 million to make Backrooms, and it made its money. He put in the work. He put in the time. So we'll see where that goes. But it's just different. It's still storytelling. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't know. But what a great letter that you wrote. That was a terrific letter. Write anytime. I'd love to see your children's book work, by the way, too. Keith O'Neill writes in. Keith O'Neill says, "Hi, Rob. On your latest edition of Robservations, you read a letter from someone who, for lack of better words, pretty much said, old movies are dated and predictable by default because newer films borrow so much from them. While he may view that as a negative, I view it as a positive. I agreed with your point. One thing I enjoy doing is seeing where stuff I like came from. One of my favorite Marvel Studios movies is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I had no idea until after I saw it was inspired by 3 Days of the Condor. The podcast Unspooled has a great episode about it, by the way. After I watched 3 Days of the Condor, not only did I enjoy that film, I appreciated Captain America: The Winter Soldier even more on rewatches. On that same note, I didn't see Rear Window until after I saw Disturbia. Recently, I watched the film Caged on Turner Classic Movies, and for those who don't know, that is the prototype for the Women in Prison movies. So if you like Orange is the New Black, give that movie a shot. Raiders of the Lost Ark is another example. I knew it was inspired by the Saturday Adventure serials, but that rabbit hole led me to watch Treasure of the Sierra Madre, one of the greatest movies ever made. Another great film. The whole sequence with the golden fertility idol is directly from the Carl Banks Uncle Scrooge comic, from the darts right down to the boulder chasing Indy. And in a way of returning the favor, DuckTales was inspired by the success of Indiana Jones. Ever wonder why Gotham City looked grimy and it rained a lot in Batman Begins? Well, you've got Blade Runner to thank for that. It was a huge visual influence. Batman vs. Superman's whole opening sequence is directly lifted from not just The Dark Knight Returns, but also from Citizen Kane. The pearl falls out of Martha Wayne's hand just like the snow globe does from Charles Kane's hand, and Thomas's dying words being Martha, the shot and tone is exactly like Rosebud. Now, don't get me all wrong, borrowing from other movies can be done badly. Like the guys at Riff Track said in their live riff of Sharknado, with all the Jaws references packed in, all this movie does is remind you that there are better shark movies out there. Apologies to Anthony Ferrante. So, while today's movies and TV borrow a lot from the past, it doesn't make the films they borrow from boring. And Rob, stay metal. And that comes to us from Keith O'Neill. Keith, great letter. Good lessons there. And I don't disagree with you. So, thanks for that one. Let's see. Got a couple more. This comes from Jim Coleman in Chino Hills, California. I like Chino Hills. Not very far from me. Hi, Robert. I love watching your show. I always find you very informative and entertaining. I love your Star Trek rants. Well, thank you. One thing I wanted to bring up with you, since the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so popular these days, step back in the Wayback Machine in 1993. My wife and I had just gotten married, and about a week later, we were at the video store looking for a cheap date night. We both love movies, so that's the perfect place to start. And walking through the store, to my surprise, I find a shelf, and there's a Captain America movie I don't recognize on it. I'd loved the two previous Batman films and was blown away at the discovery of the lost ark of comic book movies sitting right there on a shelf, waiting for me to discover its existence. I know nowadays the 1990 version of Captain America is considered bad by most Marvel fans, or they don't even know it exists. I, on the other hand, really enjoyed the film when I saw it. Is that the Reb Brown version? And I even owned it on Blu-ray. Personally, I think the film has a lot of heart and a really good cast. I like that the film is more about the Steve Rogers character trying to cope and adjust to the current world and the future he's in. I know the movie suffers from a lack of budget and a lot of scenes could look better, but I have to say I really love the story concept about how the Red Skull controls the world leaders and was behind most of the assassinations in our history. With all the movie's shortcomings, it still seems more fun and lighthearted than most superhero movies do. It's Matt Salinger. With a cast like Matt Salinger, who's pretty good as Captain America, and a complete unknown, Scott Paullin, who I like, as the Red Skull, which I think is a great performance, and one of the better-looking Red Skulls we've seen on screen. Darren McGavin, Ronnie Cox, Ned Beatty, that's a pretty great cast. I just felt lucky we got a Captain America movie at all, and it's refreshing to see a superhero who is not as powerful as Superman. Seems like most of the modern superheroes are all like Superman. So recently, I found out there's two cuts of the film. The theatrical cut, which was never shown in a theater, was the only version anyone would see, and it's 1 hour and 37 minutes long. The other is Albert Pune's original cut from 35 years ago, which is 1 hour and 51 minutes long. Apparently, the film was cut and re-edited against the director's wishes, but apparently he was able to retain the original cut as part of his agreement. That cut is his original version that he kept as a 35mm work print for the last 35 years. He passed away. Now it's gotten a 2K scan, and there's now an official Blu-ray limited release by Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Video. Thanks to the wife of the late Albert Pune, who had kept it all those years in film canisters, I've heard really good things about this version and can't wait to watch it. A lot of people who have said it's a vast improvement on the theatrical cut, and it's like watching a different movie. I can't express how excited I was to get this version on Blu-ray, and thought I would bring it up since I know this movie doesn't get much love from Marvel fans. But I love this movie for what it was, and what it was before the MCU ever became a thing. I received the Blu-ray, and I have to agree with most people's reviews of it. A much darker and serious tone to the film, and it makes you wonder if Pune had been able to keep his original vision of the film, would it have been better received? The musical score is darker toned in this version, and some of the scenes really make more sense compared to the theatrical cut. And I have to say, in this version, you really do feel some sympathy for the Red Skull and his daughter by the end. The tone throughout the whole movie is pretty serious and dark, and there's even a scene where a gardener under mind control kills his own son by decapitating him with pruners. Now, I don't think this version is going to completely change many people's minds on how they feel about this movie, but I do think it will at least give a different perspective on what this film could have been. It really does feel like two different movies. Anyway, I hope the one or two people out there who are excited by this check it out. I do think it's a much better version of the two. Now, will someone please release Roger Corman's 1994 The Fantastic Four on 4K, or at least a 2K HD transfer? Thanks for everything you do, Robert. Jim, I only saw this movie once. Why am I thinking Reb Brown? Was that the TV version? Matt Salinger, of course. See, I'm getting I slip in my old age. But that's good. I knew that came out. I haven't, I don't have it. I do not have it. So maybe I'll get it now because it's better. Look, I'm double fisting, but I'm drinking a lot of water, so. SB. First of all, let's delve in. The real Thomas Logan is written in. Let me see what you got. Let's see. Jason Nelson says, I just joined. What did you think of The Furious? Jason, I haven't seen it. I was going to go see it today. I didn't. Or yesterday. We just saw Disclosure Day. We only saw one movie. I'm probably going to for sure see it this weekend. So, yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait. What did you think of it? I've talked to people that really loved it. I'm a big fan. To me, The Raid, and The Rad 2, even radder, as I like to call it, Gareth Edwards' master strokes. Is it better than that? Because that's what I'm looking forward to. So I can't wait to see The Furious. It looks great. Video Hunter says, Rob, do you think those aliens that probed the Communion author gave aliens a bad rap? Maybe those guys were just certified freaks. Yeah, Communion, again, Whitley Strieber, it's real, then it wasn't real, then it's real. Communion and Fire in the Sky, again, were they real? I don't know. But yeah, they gave aliens a bad rap. I mean, the Greys. Also, I think nature would do a better job of making cooler looking aliens than the Greys. I mean, if you watch Disclosure Day, how was that alien even fucking born? How did it come out of its mother's womb? Come on. With that head, and Alvaro kept saying, why do all the aliens have to be like your drunken Uncle Fester, always willing to keel over? Like, where are these aliens hanging out? What are they doing? If you're not a Nordic, how do you go shopping at, like, Calabasas, man? How can you go, like, run in and hobnob with the Kardashians? Yeah, I don't know. That was another thing, since I won't say it, but yeah. Real Thomas Logan. Disclosure Day. This is what Thomas Logan says. He says, Disclosure Day equals trash. Spielberg's done. As are Ridley Scott, Francis Ford Coppola, Paul Schrader, and Oliver Stone. Scorsese is the last 70s Jedi. Flower Moon was best picture worthy. Oh, I agree with that. I can't wait to see his new movie. His horror literary adaptation. It's going to be great. Yeah, I cannot wait to see that film. But yeah, and by the way, everybody, everyone should check out Cape Fear. Javier Bardem knocks that one out of the park. So check that out. But yeah, I like The Fablemans and I like West Side Story. I think this is, I'm going to blame David Koepp for this one. Now, SB has written in, he's written a lot of these very loquacious letters that I haven't gotten to read, but his name's Brian in real life, but SB, I still have those to read, but this was the last one you sent to me 5 hours ago, so I'm going to read it as my last letter. So here we go. SB. The thing about Gen Z is that there was so much more to look down upon when it came to the millennials that we could have just welcomed them if they took part in joining in. And instead, they put that effort into making the easiest choice yet again. not like they had to agree with others and anyone should be able to choose laziness if they want, but to actively decide to add to the fuckness and plan on claiming ignorance later is bullshit. I don't have any solutions either, but anything besides being a mere modern version or being a more modern version would have been better. And I'm pretty sure I don't mean all of them, but I also haven't encountered one that makes me less confident in categorizing them as I-type either. I can say, however, that whenever I see one with a skateboard, I can already assume that anything the others can do, that one can do it as well, if not better. One of the things that they use their ignorance for is thinking past the current topic as if they understand it fully and can't waste any more time on it, as if it covers up this lack of understanding. It's not fooling anyone but the rest of their peers, which I suppose is what matters. By the way, you really don't like millennials. For people who want everyone to notice their individualism, they sure do nothing but pick a side of extremes and picking a fight where they're facing the wrong direction entirely, in a case where there was no winner or loser to be declared in the first place, and still managed to lose. Their only victory being possibly that they can't see how they failed, and knowing that their biggest fear is to be seen failing by people who don't matter. Something as simple and interesting as making a story flow well from shot to shot takes many a lifetime to master. Before critiquing what an entire franchise has become, I would think that looking at what a thing or single entity that we can focus on as we discuss the single entity. To define something which only compares to other things seems like a waste of time. If Hitchcock without audio is somehow keeping our attention, I don't know what purpose it would serve to start comparing other projects to that kind of magic. I haven't even seen any of his films all the way through, but my favorite t-shirt has the image of the Jaws 2 poster, and I've never seen that movie either. But I don't even think it makes sense to compare that to the original. I don't know if I made my point there, but I understand it. Okay. I like Jaws 2. Jaws 2 is not bad. I think I can provide a good... by the way, the lovely friend of mine who got me the Jaws 2 disc, the lovely Emma Bannon, all the way from the UK, got me my Jaws 2 special edition, so thank you, Emma. I think I can provide a good generalization of this shared mentality that I have to see people different in any Gen Z encounter. I have a shitty job in a pharmacy, where I have this joke that I use where I tell people that I got here because I majored in stickers. Sometimes, when we return items to the manufacturer, we need the packages to be intact and require that the labels are removed without damaging them when we remove the adhesive glue. I've got my own method, so when I show someone my method of sticker removal, I don't care if they follow it or not. I'm just providing an option. But there's a certain Gen Zer that I'd known and ended up showing her the common sense obvious ropes when it came to stickers once, and I already knew what the outcome would be. They care only about what people think of them as much as they claim not to, because not caring is also part of the image they try and maintain. So even when it comes to something no one cares about, they still need to win, which can also be defined as not losing, which is also incorrect, but that's a separate issue. It'd be fine if they were being rebellious, or if they couldn't just give half a fuck, but they go down this more conformist path before they choose to suck. Keep in mind that they didn't have the same opportunities to develop skills or anything, and how anything carrying a prop like... and now anything carrying a prop like a skateboard is already miles ahead. They desperately can't afford to lose anymore, so they're in a position to remove a sticker well, instead of succeeding or failing, and they make their choice to choose to fail, therefore removing the effort factor, and upon ripping it off without concern, they also succeed. And as pointless as it were to type all that, that's exactly where the present and future era are. I care about my job and the things that I do there less than anyone. There's a certain way to not give a fuck, but the way they do it, especially if you can see the bigger picture any more than they can, is just counterproductive to everything. I think the scariest part is that they can't recognize another Holocaust situation should it present itself. but that they're not even thinking about having the ability to lay on a couch with Schindler's List playing in the background. Maybe it's our fault for not producing an exciting review of it for them that ranked high enough to be picked up on their radar. Someone needs to teach a class on how school never fixed a case of stupid either. I think regardless of age, it's necessary. And it's not just Gen Z. I actually see the same weakness in a majority of people. And someone mentioned something about the first-person viewpoint last week, and I usually keep this observation of mine to myself because I can tell how no one wants to hear it. But I think the thing that was the cutoff point for a lot of people when it comes to developing certain skills in life was the influence of Nintendo on our lives. There's a clear distinction to be made between people who beat Mike Tyson on Nintendo and probably other monumental achievements in 2D gaming, and the people who were really just discovering video games when we got to college in the form of 3D first-person shooters, mostly with Halo. This is an interesting theory. I'm not going to deny whatever skill is involved in that game, but it's not the same as the skill one develops from a 2D subject on a screen where you can move it around in the third person. I always thought that makes more sense to experience a video game in 3D because seeing something in the first person is what we already do and can never stop doing anyway. Seems like a waste to translate that into another viewpoint just to go back and imitate the first person anyway. You can also see how you suck if it's in 2 dimensions. I think people who aren't as experienced with 2D games would like to be known as being as skillful, and since it's closer to 3D in the first person, they tend to assume that they've got to be skilled or more skilled because of that added D. I used to think I was more skilled because of an added D. What I hate explaining is how it's only like 2.5D, and there are one of those Ds that's completely artificial. In a lot of ways, there's a lot less that exists if we're talking about what's practical. Then they go out of their way to say they've got some experience and attempt to maintain it can all be considered in the category of video games. It's not a retro preference, and I don't believe that just because their games imagine the action as gun violence that they're more mature. I just see it as a cursor centering itself where there's no time to interact or react to, just the aftermath of an instantly dead object, which is the same as taking a picture with a camera. If they haven't picked up the skill and timing that comes from 2D non-first-person gaming, and the thing necessary to fall into the category of video games, they should have at least come up with a second thing that we can call video games because they clearly are games with the same video element. I just think it's a separate skill and that we should segregate them before adding a whole list to any person's talent. Then I might as well mention the people who treat video games as stories that are as good or any other story ever told, because they aren't. Even if they aren't necessary, I didn't start playing a game so I can be interrupted for 30 minutes of cutscenes, especially if it's the greatest game I've ever played. Seems like the current standard requires a half-assed mediocre story that someone is way too proud of, with its video game equivalent, usually with multiple endings based on choices made, not in actual gameplay either, because they didn't want to be responsible for shitty storytelling, so they made us choose from options they provided. So if movie watching wasn't as broad as a thing as it is, and as if it was being breached by the masses who want to claim they're veteran movie watchers and have some experience watching a movie or TV show, then you eventually get the people who've played a first-person game saying that they understood cinematography after they've never defeated Mike Tyson. Best for them to stay ignorant about that, because as little chance most of us had back then, I'm positive they're twice as incapable now. It doesn't seem like any generation is satisfied with any younger generation making its way up, but whatever is merging everything into a shitty blob of mediocrity is only going to pay off if someone actually puts in some effort in this current state, as it makes it easier for lesser than usual talent to have an easier and more honest time of getting noticed with all the reduced quality of competition, since no one is aware where the standard is now. And with all of the nonsense with forced equity or whatever they're concerned with, anything is still possible. It's just dumber to be proud of it too early these days. Also, I haven't played a new video game in 7 years, but I'm satisfied with what I got. Have you noticed that in trailers and ads for video games, they don't make it easy to find who the developer is? There used to be more pride or even a reliance on it being in our faces for it to sell. I can think of all the kinds of possibilities as to why this is, but it's too bad that they all make sense and there's nothing hopeful about them. I think the thing most people don't see in a world where anything is possible is that if things are to improve, it doesn't mean the fix is going to be pleasant. And the deeper it gets, the more death in the real world is going to have to happen. Death met by a level of ignorance some other asshole agrees upon and distributes to the rest of them to maintain and act like they weren't responsible for. Why are people getting excited for movies based on comics and video games and action figures if we only get 3 movies a year now? I am not the authority, but once they get in, where's the fucking movie go? I don't think I'm better than anyone. I'm just superior when it comes to consumption. Well, that was from Brian. Brian, your SB persona is always very interesting. I have a lot to say about that, but I will say something that I find interesting. When it comes to the younger generation, there's like any generation, there's both good people and bad people, or people that care and people that don't care. But I am seeing the thing that gives me a little bit of hope is I am seeing more people looking outward. People are looking for meaning outside of just social media. They're realizing that you're never going to find true enlightenment if you're just looking at things that you have wanted to see reflected back at you. Starting off this conversation, I talked about how I was really interested as a kid, as an 8-year-old, in strange phenomenon. And, back then, there was a book about the Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz that had a die-cut cover of a ship. And you would open it up, and the light shining through the cover of the ship would disappear. It was a stupid thing. It was a stupid, dumb thing. But as a kid, when you picked up that book, it made me want to read it, as dumb as that might seem. It was like getting a die-cut cover on a comic book that had like something lenticular or holographic on it, which, it was a shiny thing. I was old enough to know it was stupid. But when I was a kid, and that Bermuda Triangle book was on the spindle rack at Lakeside Drugs, or I found it in some other place, I loved opening that cover. And it was, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know if there's a picture online, but I think it's Charles Berlitz. That was the name of the author, right? He wrote a book called The Bermuda Triangle, and the cover, you literally open it up, and the light shining through, when the cover came up, the boat would disappear. Just like the boats in the Bermuda Triangle or whatever. It was a stupid thing. But as an 8-year-old, I loved it. And that's what made me, I made my mom buy the book for me or something. And that's why I wanted it. So I do see a trend that people are things are changing. Because no one's satisfied with the way things are right now. And that's always the best way to see change happen, I think. And on that note, let me see. Thomas Logan goes on to say the worst Spielberg films: Crystal Skull, The BFG, The Terminal, Always, Disclosure Day. The best Spielberg films are Schindler's List, Jaws, Munich, E.T., and Raiders. I would add Empire of the Sun and Lincoln to that list. I think Lincoln is a masterpiece, and I love Empire of the Sun. But anyway, yeah. Let me just check one more thing, and I think I'm going to end this show, everybody. You know what? I'm just going to end this show. Well, wait. I should see if anybody fired in a tip. I don't know if they did, but let me see if somebody fired in a tip. I don't want you to miss out. You will have the final comment if somebody fired in a tip, because I have to look in a different place. Nope. Only Darth Plato did. So everybody has had their piece. I believe that I would. I think I've got everyone. I'm going to end this. I just want to remind everybody the link is in the description. If you are interested in our original movie poster ongoing sale, original posters from a cache that from 45 years ago, that posters from the 50s, 60s, 70s, the 80s. We have posters from James Bond. We dropped Hitchcock today. There's horror. There's sci-fi. There's Barbra Streisand. We have Disney next week. We got musicals coming up. We got Woody Allen coming up. We got classics of the 60s, 70s, and 80s coming up. We still have hundreds, thousands of items to drop. Check them out if you want. And you can go in the description and see it. It's on eBay. And the store is called Find Your Niche. It's an eBay store called Find Your Niche. Gabe's store, he has a 100% seller rating. And he does a great job shipping stuff out. You'll get it within days. It'll come lightning fast. The Hitchcock stuff just dropped tonight or this afternoon. I think there's some auction stuff up there now. Next week is Disney to coincide with Toy Story 5. So check it out. A lot of great stuff has been sold already. I want to thank everybody that's dipped in and got some stuff. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via super chats and tips. Whatever you have to say, please leave me comments below. I just want to say, yeah, tell your friends to subscribe and all that. I want to get 30,000 more subscribers so I can get my damn YouTube plaque. It's been too long. And, yeah. So thanks for spending Friday night with me. And hopefully, watch Star City, watch For All Mankind, get some physical media. A lot of good stuff is coming out. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen and keep watching the skies because the truth is out there. By the way, X-Files seasons 1 through 11 are streaming on the Disney Channel and Hulu. And those first 4 seasons of the X-Files, man, if you're interested in Disclosure Day, and they do a pretty damn good job, check it out. Thanks to the moderating staff and to everyone.